What year's the Comic-Con shirt from?
It's past,
Okay,
a few months ago in Boston,
yeah, I saw Boston. I was like, I
the,
keep wanting to get to a Comic-Con and never drag myself.
yeah, the costumes that these people make.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
There was
It's amazing.
There was one she looked, Predator.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we are live Zoom and YouTube. It looks like cable access is ready as well. So whenever you'd like to.
All right, call to order Berlin Finance Committee meeting. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded. The select board. Call to order.
Yes, at 7:06, we'll call the select board to order. Myself and Scott Hawkins are present.
Okay, we just have one quick item of business for the finance committee to approve our minutes, so we don't forget those. So for our last meeting on March 5th, do we have a motion for those minutes?
Make motion
Yeah,
to approve. Second.
all right. Any other? And Cliff, you can hear us, right, Cliff?
I can.
Okay,
Oh, he's low.
we barely heard you though.
Can you turn Cliff up a little bit in the room here, please?
See how it goes when we do both. So any other discussion in the minutes? All right, roll call, Scott, aye.
Yeah.
Cliff, I.
That's
All right,
correct.
we can hear you well. All right, minutes past 4-0.
Scott, may I mention that I'm not taking minutes?
Correct. Mary is taking minutes for us.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay. We'll get to the schools.
Do we stand for, do the pledge first?
No, we don't have any.
We don't?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry, we're used to my meetings rather than start with the pledge, sorry.
What would you like me to type and put anything on the screen? What would you like me to pull up?
Probably bring up the presentation that
From March 11th?
We'll turn this over to, I don't know if you're going or Aaron going, whoever wants to, as soon as she gets this up so that the public can see it.
So just for the record, you know, we created QR code, right? So people have access to it. We're also having our district website as well too. So we're really trying to get that information out to many places as we can. So we're hoping people certainly aren't seeing this for the first time. We really worked hard between school committee, Mike, our chairman, and myself and Aaron to make sure we had that out everywhere we could.
So we can confirm through Cliff if he sees it.
Yeah, I don't have to share it yet. Just wanted to get it up first on the computer on the TV screen. Thank you. Doing like triple duty over there. Thank you. I haven't had a turn the volume down on that.
Delay.
Second.
Let me just share the screen with everybody online so they can see it too, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, all set.
All right, so good evening. For those that don't know me, my name is Al Gannon. I'm the interim superintendent of schools for Berlin-Williston Regional School District. Mike Topman, as people might know as well too, is our chairman of the school committee, and Aaron Osborne, our director of finance and operations. So we're glad we're here with you tonight. Just a little recap before I go any further. I want to just stop and just have you please appreciate the artwork that's in front of us right here. These are all students right now that are attending Tohoto that were Boylston kids, are our Boylston kids, but either went through Boylston Memorial or at Tohoto right now.
Berlin Memorial.
Berlin Memorial. Did I say Boston? Oh, I'm sorry about Berlin Memorial. Thank you. Sorry about that. Either Berlin Memorial and are at Tohoto right now. Just absolutely incredible work that these kids did. That are all students that live in our community of Berlin. But it's also just a general reminder for us to remember why we're having these conversations, right? It's all about our kids. And sometimes when we're having these adult conversations, we sometimes forget about that. So it's just a gentle reminder of what we're doing each and every day. We have this artwork displayed all throughout the central office as well too, so people can see that as well too. So we don't forget about the reason why we're even here at this meeting tonight talking about our budget. So just a little bit of update. We presented this budget to school committee on March 11th. It is a 45 slide presentation. Aaron and I have done this multiple times, so it's not our first time doing it here for Berlin-Wilson. We've worked together before. Usually we have a much more comprehensive presentation, usually like 11 slides is what we're usually down to, but we felt to bless you. We felt it was important, sitting with school committee, sitting with our chairman, Mike Topman, and really making sure we told the story and making sure that it's not only about the budget, but it's telling the story of the budget. We know people had a lot of questions previous to us coming in, and we wanted to make sure we really identified all that and gave people all the information they need. We're hoping it's a resource, so it helps explain the questions. Even when we came here, when you're talking about transportation, there are questions about that, questions about school and school choice. All of that was happening. We thought it was important to really put this all together in this presentation so that people could really have a clear understanding about the budget process in a regional school district, working with our regional agreement as well too. A lot of time, a lot of meetings both at school committee, a lot of meetings at budget sub, a lot of meetings with our school committee members themselves in preparation for that March 11th meeting. We had a decent turnout of people that were there, and we felt really good about that. School committee supported the budget with a 6-0 vote. We had to do that in that time frame of March 11th, and just for clarity, to make sure we're within that 45-day time frame, right, to be able to get that on your town meetings and your town warrant as well too. This is the budget we're at this point now. The school committee voted on it, and now the work starts between now and the next week, because we're hoping on our next school committee meeting on March 25th, we'll have a finalized budget. We met with Berlin on March 7th, Boylston, I'm sorry, met in Boylston on March 17th, met with their FinCom, and now we're here meeting with Berlin as well too, getting information from you. The way we feel is best, instead of going through this 45-page presentation again, if you had questions specific regarding Berlin or regarding Tohoto, we certainly will be able to answer those for you as well too. Got some information, like I said, from Boylston on Monday. We'll get our information from you guys tonight, hopefully. And then that's the work between now and when we meet with school committee on Tuesday to be able to present them another budget. As you all know, that the budget that was voted on school committee can go down, but it certainly can't go up in these next weeks as well too. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have on behalf of the school committee and myself regarding Berlin and obviously Tohoto as well too.
I have the budget that's on the website, and I was just looking to see if I had this one electronically that I could pull up on the screen, but I don't think that I do. I'm sorry. Just looking to see if I have it here.
You know what, I might have the QR code.
Yeah, I noticed yours.
Yeah, I had the March 11th, the March 11th one pulled up that's on the website, so let's see if I have it. In my email.
This is a different March 11 one.
Yes, this one's March
If you
19th.
go to bbrsd.org
Yep.
and it's down
Am I
lower
on the
left,
wrong page?
it's this.
That's the one I had. Oh, that one. Oh, I did have the wrong one pulled up. That's the agenda. All right,
Kristen,
fine.
you'll know if you have page 45 on there, that was one of the last slides we put in there. That's the letter from the Department of Education.
Yep.
Mhm.
Hearing 311, that's just the agenda. Having trouble opening it. I just get the notice when I open it about the public hearing. So, you may just have to walk through it, verbally. I apologize.
All
I'll
45
keep
pages?
looking. Well,
No.
We'll find it.
I can keep
Just-
looking.
Just asking for a friend, for all, do you want us to go through all of it, or?
I think right now, initially start with the Berlin side.
Sure.
And I was looking at probably what's, what I guess is technically slide 20, which is page 10, slide 20, where you start giving some comparisons here, starting with BMS.
Yep.
I know some of this is what you discussed before. You
Yep.
can, nothing, anything that's not changed from previously, you just move
Sure.
on, but any other little updates.
Sure. So you want me to kind of take, okay.
Yep.
So slide 20 gets to, if you look at the drivers we presented last time, we tried to update most of those drivers. As you can see, we've moved salaries into a negative position at this point. A lot of that is taking out those contracted paraprofessionals. So we kept the paraprofessionals, but we took out the contracted piece. We still have contracted paraprofessionals, but our commitment is by next year that we will do our best to do away with those. The current year's, plan did not include those contracted paraprofessionals either. So, we feel like we need to make that commitment. I will say, employee health was confirmed at 18%. It's probably the biggest, employee and retiree health is probably the biggest driver. So when we talk about, not being able to be a level service at sort of numbers that might work, this is the biggest driver. I mean, we have about $4 million in combined health insurance between employees and retirees. And when you add 18% to that, you're talking a lot of money pretty quickly. So that gets very challenging. Homeless transportation, we have kept that. I know we had some discussions on that. I think I clarified that there is the potential for some reimbursement. It's subject to appropriations. It's typically been around 50%, which is where this number came from.
Karen, just saying.
We now-
You good?
Oh, yeah, no, good. I just heard,
Is everyone
and I didn't
okay?
know if
Yeah,
anyone
okay,
was like
yeah.
coughing.
We now have 3 identified McKinney-Vento eligible students in Berlin. I'm not entirely sure what that is going to look like, but we're going to, try to continue to commit to this number because it's what we've given and what we've approved. That's come, that information has come to me since we presented this budget. So that's going to be a challenge we're going to deal with. We have 3 identified students. I'm not going to give any more information than that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's a fluctuating number
Yep.
at any time, right?
Some of the movement in special education students from both Berlin to Boylston, move ups to Toronto are also identified in this budget. So you'll see special education transportation. We did get some final budget increase numbers for those, and they were a little better than we had initially projected. So you'll see that number coming down a little bit, plus accounting for the moves that we talked about. Electricity, tuition, we have applied. So I've done a detailed analysis of circuit breaker and looked at how much we anticipate getting, plus having some rollover funds from prior years. So I was willing to apply some more funding to offset some of those tuition costs. Those are out of district tuition costs mostly for out of district special education students that we can't accommodate. So the next page talks about some of the definitive cuts we've made. You'll notice we start with, this is slide 21. We get to eliminating the contracted paraprofessionals. Again, the positions will still exist. We're taking out the additional contracted cost for each of those paraprofessionals. We've reduced some staff. As I said before, I've used a little more circuit breaker to help offset things. And some of those needs for special education transportation have changed. So since we presented prior, we've managed to pull about $304,000 out of Berlin Memorial School.
Geez, please appreciate the staff reductions and it's the more the reallocations, right? So we're not making those huge swiping cuts, right, where we cut out art and we cut out music and cut out phys ed and cause everyone to be in a panic and then have to revisit that. We were very strategic about that and reallocated those positions.
Right.
So that those positions will still be, or those services will still be happening in the school at Berlin Memorial, but they'll be distributed through other staff as well too.
So getting down into following the assessment process, you have the school budget, the total school budget that we've shared previously, as well as the district office share to get to a total budget for Berlin Memorial. Chapter 70 is pulled out, the share of Chapter 70 in accordance with the regional agreement, as well as the share of Chapter 71. There are some relatively detailed explanations about how these are calculated in other slides. I won't dwell on that. You can also refer to the regional agreement for that. To get to a total Berlin Memorial School assessment of $4,512,926. So we'll skip over Boylston, which is 23, 24, 25. Slide 26, Tohoto Regional Middle High School. Salaries remain a bit of a challenge, largely because some of those positions that I talked about have moved up to Tohoto since our first presentation. So whereas some of the salaries in Berlin Memorial and Boylston Elementary go down, some of Tohonto's go up as a result. Employee health, same thing. Retiree health, same thing. Special education transportation, again, up a bit because of those moves, but a little bit offset by the fact that the increase was a little lower than we anticipated. Private special education tuitions, I applied more additional circuit breaker as well to Tohoto to help offset that. So I've tried to be equitable in terms of how we apply that relative to the students at the schools. You will also see a pretty detailed explanation of how circuit breaker, school choice, and grant funds may be applied to the school districts. The same with collaborative tuitions. So private special education tuitions and collaborative tuitions are both eligible for us to use circuit breaker to offset. So we need to use circuit breaker reimbursement funds to offset eligible special education costs. The easiest place to do that is just typically special education out of district tuitions, but it's arbitrary what you take it out of. So then what were we able to cut? We cut some of those contracted costs through the paraprofessionals. We've cut staff by 3 bodies. We've used additional circuit breaker to offset those tuitions for total cuts at Tohoto since the prior version of $340,000. So there's a little bit in the next slide on how Tohoto operating costs. That is available for people to read. It's also available in your regional agreement. I'd encourage people to read it. It's very exciting. Slide 29 gets to the operating assessment. Very similar process. You have the school budget, the district share for the total budget. We take out Chapter 70, Chapter 71, which is transportation reimbursement. It looks to me like traditionally the charter reimbursement has come out of Tohoto. It's been used to offset Tohoto, so that's what I did for a total assessment. Then when we get into the total assessment, there are calculations of how to allocate minimum local contribution. Again, it's elsewhere in the presentation and in your regional agreement to get to a total amount left over for the above minimum local contribution that each town splits. I tried to color code these. You may recall in your prior version, I had a darker green for one of these and it covered up the numbers. I tried to use lighter colors to try to offset that a little better. So you get to the Berlin minimum share and the, above minimum share and the Boylston as in accordance with the regional agreement as well. It's a calculation of foundation enrollment using, I believe, a 5-year moving average, as I recall. It's hard to keep up with all of the various formulas. You'll see later, there's also a 4-year moving average. That is an average of 2 separate numbers, just to make things as transparent as possible, apparently. So getting into the total Berlin operating assessments, I struggled to find specific operating assessments at the school levels from last year, given everything that went on. So pardon me for not having those. But for this year, you see school level with the Tohoto MLC and Tohoto above. I thought it was fair to line those out because those are responsibilities to a total fiscal 26 operating budget of $8,371,867. Again, this is about a 7.32% increase or $570,992. I think as Al shared, we do understand this is probably above what Berlin would hope to be paying as assessment, and we're continuing to work on that. But as you can see, I mean, this is a below level service. We've really done a lot to cut this out, to cut out everything we could that wasn't absolutely necessary. Boylston operating assessment on the next page. Realistically, somewhat, and I'm not in any way blaming the regional agreement, but the regional agreement has each town own their out-of-district tuitions at the elementary level. But once those students go up to Tohoto, it's a shared cost. So one of the realities is that Boylston has had a couple students move up to Tohoto, which means now the two towns split those costs. That would have happened back when you were 3 separate districts, but it's reflected now in the assessment process, right? Instead of being 2 separate schools, it's one district. So then we get into debt and capital costs. Slide 33 gives you an explanation of that. You will see a lot of explanation on how the regional agreement allocates that. That is those 2 separate numbers. So it takes an actual count of the students in the building and the foundation budget, the foundation enrollment calculated number in each given year. It then averages those 2 numbers and then does a 4-year moving average of that average number. So, yeah, that's just the reality of what it says.
We really tried hard to spell that all out in this presentation so people
Yep.
could use this as a reference so they can understand
Yep.
that. I know when we came here before, people had questions about that as well too. So we really wanted to make sure we're giving some information regarding that in the regional agreement.
So debt and Tohoto, one of the things I think we've shared is that there was some issues with the calculations in the past couple of years, but this is the debt allocation in accordance with this debt and capital costs calculation. So taking the average of the years, and then when you get into the actual capital, and this is where I want to be really clear, the number that the school committee approved includes all of these items. We've said from, I think, the very first meeting with you all that we consider some of this a conversation. The elevator controls is a huge priority. We will have major ADA complications. The items in gray, we don't think are essential. We certainly want to make sure that things like the roof are in the back of people's minds, because at some point that will come to bear and will become imminent, right? So as we kick things down the road, I think we'd really like to be able to do the cameras. This is a security issue for our students. We've had multiple issues where we wanted some external cameras. We've been asked to provide footage from external cameras that we just don't have on the parking lots and things like that. You'll recall in our prior iterations, this was a much higher number. We've worked really hard to work with the company that does the cameras and bring that number down as far as possible and figure out sort of the bare minimum. We've had some conversations, and we could probably make do with what we have on student and staff devices if we had to, if that's something where the town were to want to have a conversation. Again, that is something that will come to bear. We would not be able to get by next year without some of those devices. just given the technology shifts and the fact that, you know, we want to operate as a 21st century school district. We need kids to have access to technology.
And give credit to Aaron and Joe Sposato, our tech director, coming up with that 5-year plan that we've asked for, right? So it's like owning a home, right? We own Berlin Memorial. The town does, I should say. These are all things that need to be done. So next year, when you see the capital request, you're gonna see items 4 through 8 still on there because it's things that we need, but we need to prioritize. And to Aaron's point, you know, number one is it's sort of non-negotiable because it needs to take place. As a superintendent of schools, I'd say number 2 is non-negotiable as well too. We really need to be having those safety in place for our kids and for activities that we've been talking to the police about that might be taking place at night as well too. So that is a priority that we should be able to look at that stuff remotely as well too. And that's where it is. We'll be hooked up to both Berlin, Boylston, and Tohoto so that we can see what's taking place and keeping our kids and our staff and our buildings safe at all times.
I guess I want to add to what Al said, that so that you will see these things again next year, plus fiscal
That's right.
27.
That's right. Yep.
So,
Yep.
you know, I'm sure you are familiar with deferred maintenance and deferred capital.
That's right.
It eventually comes back to bite you, but that's the reality we live in. I'm not questioning that. When we get to the Tohoto capital, similar, I think the middle school furniture, in the past, there have been some things that were pushed into multi-year efforts. And the problem was, you know, if you don't do the first year or you don't do the second year at some point. So this was sort of considered something that we could do over multiple years. It's desks and chairs and things like that. I'd encourage you to come to Tohoto at some point and ask to see the middle school furniture. I've sat in it. It's comical. It's very much elementary school furniture in the middle school. Arguably, many of our 6th graders, it's okay for them, right? When you start getting into 7th and 8th, you get into furniture you get into students who are my size, right? And larger in some cases. So, you know, we'd like to keep something in there. The projector and controller, you know, this is something, the controller, actually, I'm having conversations just today and tomorrow. I'll have more conversations with Joe. We've managed to get the existing controller working again. It wasn't working. So, we could probably limp along a bit on that and cut that number if we had to. The projector is pretty much end of life. It's been there since the building went in. I think, you know, we've had a couple different sort of conversations. I think at Boylston the other night, they suggested getting big TVs. That becomes challenging because we need something that can pull up to access the stage. So, you know, we'd be looking at that. Again, we get to student and staff device replacement, and talking to Joe, we could ease off of that for a year. But our challenge is going to become, that is going to be something next year. We've had some of the conversations, I think, with many of the people in this room about the fact that this really should be in operations. These devices are a lot like books and things like that, workbooks and things like that we used to pay out of operations. The items in gray, we can kick down the road a bit. The building automation system is really an efficiency item. It's operating, probably not as efficient as it could be, but that's, you know, the reality. I think we all deal with things that may not be quite as efficient as we'd like. We are going to look again, the theatrical lighting, all the auditorium items. Those are items that were on that sort of 3-year plan. To upgrade. This represented 2 years of that 3-year plan because the first year wasn't approved. But we're going to revisit that and see sort of what we can get by with. If you do look up at some of the overhead lighting, you'll see a lot of lights out. You know, we'd like to get LED lights up in there. They last longer, they're more effective. The phone system, we're looking at we really would pull that straight off the table, the phone system. We're looking at some other options for that phone system. In the long run, that would replace all of our phones and put us all in the same system.
Before you turn the page, I think you're hearing us say, Aaron and I, not only do we work closely with Mike and our school committee, but we're also working very closely with our principals, right? So we're having these conversations with John from Berlin Memorial and Lisa from Tohoto about what their priorities are. And this is what they're telling us. And even today, meeting with Lisa, that auditorium piece, the amount of people that rent our facilities and use our facilities, and not only that, but it's a community event, right? It's a community place for both towns to go to. So we want to make sure that we're representing that well. So that is a priority for her as well as for us. But I don't want you to think we're making these decisions in isolation. It's a lot of conversations with the people that are in these buildings day to day.
So getting down to capital assessments on slide 38. Berlin's debt assessment, elementary capital, and then Tohoto capital share. Again, we recognize those capital numbers and are high relative to what you might want to do. We're happy to have that conversation and talk about what we think is realistic and what this body thinks is realistic. So total Berlin assessments on page 39. This is what gets us into we have the operating assessment, the debt / capital
back,
assessment.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
went
one
too
more
far
back,
back.
one more back.
Oh,
Keep
okay.
going.
Yep, down one.
Yeah.
You're one more down. 38.
My 39 has a
She's
thank you
off.
on it.
She's got the old, do you not have 30 on the Berlin
Okay.
assessment for fiscal year 2026?
There,
Oh, you
okay.
have it? I
Okay,
have an
so
appendix.
slide 39 is a sort of a revisiting of the items in prior slides, but it consolidates everything for total assessments for Berlin. So, understanding the operating assessment represents that 7.32% increase. The capital, given we haven't really taken anything out of it and we're looking towards a conversation on that. That is very high and we understand that's astronomically high, 245% increase. And then total assessments, of course, is driven by that capital number. So again, we welcome that conversation. And that gets us to the end. The appendix includes some items of interest. There was a prior calculation that includes BORE, BMRE, and BBRE. That's what that slide explains. There is also some information. There's a section of the regional agreement that speaks to reporting to the towns in specific categories. We believe this presentation meets those categories. If you look, each category references specific slides or items that specifically are not budgeted. We have the motion that the school committee approved, and then we have a letter from the Department of Education, sort of talking a little bit about their thoughts on sort of our budget situation and regional agreement.
And the only other thing that's slide 44, which I don't think you have up there or in that presentation, Kristen, is what Laurie and our school committee secretary read as that final budget and the final assessments for the town that also include the capital as well too. So that sort of gives a summary of our presentation again. It's pretty thorough. We put a lot of time into this to making sure we answered all the questions that we believe people had. I think we felt like we got feedback at the meeting that we had at school committee that people thought it was answered the questions they needed to have, which is probably the reason why we didn't have many questions after that, because we were hoping that it was as thorough as the school committee and myself and Aaron believe that it is. But we're here today to talk to you guys about further questions you might have.
I was just doing the one quick calculation, so obviously, like the capital stuff would probably be spread over multiple years. I just did the quick math. It looks like right now, Berlin's share when it comes to the Tohoto items would be 35.64%.
Give or take, yeah. I don't know if this
Yeah, I
spreadsheet
just
in front of me, but it's
just
that
right,
sounds
so
very close.
A lot of those numbers are correct here. So whatever numbers we come up with or whatever, if it's like the top 4 items, it's Tohoto there, it's that, and our share would be 35.64%.
We're hoping tonight that you're going to give us some information that we can then work in these next few days to be able to get in front of school committee on next Tuesday to be able to finalize this and get this ready. We know it's important for both the towns of Boylston and the town of Berlin, so that you can get that ready to go to print in early April as well too. And those are conversations I've had with both April and Kristen.
I have some information that I can share on free cash.
Yes, that would be good.
and where we're at there. So I actually have a slide, which of course is, I don't know what's going on with my computer tonight. But we haven't gotten our certification on free cash from DOR yet. And there were some items from FY24 that will impact that number and will end up rolling over into FY25 free cash. So the conservative estimate that we're at is 1.2 million in free cash. The FinCom does have a policy that they have passed in accordance with DOR regulations that 30% of free cash goes to capital. And so that works out to, I believe that's $360,000. We do have a little, just about $311,000 in town capital requests for free cash. We do also have 145,000 in police and fire requests, but those come out of the public safety mitigation funds, which are the funds we get from Highland Commons and from Riverbridge to offset some of those expenses. So those aren't in the mix, which is a good thing. So hopefully that kind of helps guide you. We hope to have the final number any day now. We're just waiting for our DOR rep, and I know June has been in contact with them. It is possible that number could go up some, but at this point, I have to operate on the assumption that all of those costs that we think are going to come out of free cash for 24 will come out. You know, obviously we'll be in a slightly better financial position if some of them don't, and we will be able to, you know, have a slightly higher number, and I could certainly communicate that information out as soon as we have it.
The other part, I'd be remiss, and I've said it multiple times, just so you know, we're in the middle of contract negotiations as well with our teachers. And that's a figure that we're still just starting the process, or maybe in the middle of that process right now. But that is definitely something that we keep in mind when we're doing this budget for next year as well too, for FY26.
I can, if you'd like, do you want me to pull up the overall where we're at with the budget,
Yeah, you
Scott?
can pull, while you're pulling that up, I was just doing the quick math. First of all, obviously with the free cash number, and like I said, we have a policy of, again, it is a guidance policy, so it's not something that is, that we can't deviate from. But as you indicated, what was it? You said the town requests, again, these are just the requests, are what, 311,000? And BMS, if we just took the, you know, like the, what you had on there, I think it's the top three, you have, you know, your priority on that, they total 298,400, and the top four on the Tohoto side, taking the 35.64% for our share would be 137,570 is what I came out with for the actual number.
Scott, I'm sorry, on the Tohoto, what numbers were you at?
Oh, I used the top four
Top
items.
four, okay.
Yeah, and then I took our share.
Okay, fair enough.
So the number I gave of 137,570 would be Berlin's share, assuming that the 35.64% allocation.
And just to Aaron's point, right, the middle school furniture, you know, certainly we'd like it all, but we understand that we can't, and so we're willing to do that piecemeal over time as well too.
Yeah, obviously you're lucky with something like that. It's not an all or nothing
Yep.
type of situation.
And the exact number is $311,085 in town capital requests. And then I was trying to figure that percentage out as well, because I put the school capital ones into a spreadsheet as well here, and I didn't quite get the percentage right. I think I was off by a couple $100, but I think I came out to, let's see, 0.356. Is it 356?
Give or take,
5.6.
356.
Yeah, it's.
Okay, so I was pretty close.
Yeah,
So then I
very
just
close.
added
Yeah,
my
that's-
$200 in at the end.
Yeah.
So.
Kristen, can you just scroll up a little for me on
Yep.
that one? Sorry. Okay, thanks.
So I just highlighted in green the ones that were not grayed out on
Sure.
your presentation, and I totaled those up on the side.
Yep.
And those totaled up, if I did the math correctly, to 436,022. But that might not be an exact number because, like I said, I didn't know if I had the percentage completely right in the breakdown, but I was
Yeah.
pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, can you scroll up a little bit more on
Yep.
the Berlin
Absolutely.
for the figure on the right, two
I
hundred
can make
and
this bigger, too.
98,000, yeah. You're pretty close.
Pretty close?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Kristen, can I ask you to share your screen?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't realize I wasn't. Yes, sir. Hold on a moment, please.
Thank you.
This is why we should always have a member virtual.
Well, Brittany had it on split screen, but
Oh.
it was super tiny when it was up there. I doubt people would be able to see it.
Come on. It'd be nice if the technical stuff would behave tonight.
When Kristen's doing that, I didn't get a chance to watch or tune in at all on Monday night. It was St. Patrick's Day and other things to do, but is Boylston, is Boylston sticking to the 500,000 number on the I think Howard Drummond.
Sounds like it's the operating side that includes, their operating includes Tohoto Capital. Like in debt and capital.
And what about debt?
Tohoto debt and capital, I believe, yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, increases to those.
So to answer your question, yes.
Yeah.
That's the last number we were given on Monday night.
And was there a capital number on BPS?
BES, so they do that, they would do that from cash. They had we had very
okay.
similar conversation about things we could
Right.
take out. They had the full 216.5 represented.
We do it a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to remind myself, and it's worthwhile
Yep.
stating that 500,000 is the increase from fiscal 25 going into fiscal 26. It's not the absolute numbers
Yeah.
that we're talking about in those categories.
That's correct.
No,
Mhm.
I don't know what it's doing. But I think that my computer does not like me this evening.
Go back, it's completely frozen, it's actually not even updated.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Al hasn't moved in a while on her.
But see, if I try, when I tried to open Zoom again, then it just wants me to end it, which I don't want to do because it would end it for everybody. So,
Cliff, are you actually, do you see anybody, do you actually see when it's live video, any movement here?
No, I do not.
Hey, Kristen, is that in the budget Dropbox? The Dropbox?
yeah,
What you're working with, is that in the
Mhm.
drive? Cliff, did you catch that?
Is it in the drive? Is that what someone said?
it
Mhm.
is.
Okay, I can pull the drive up.
Still trying to figure out how I can pull it up,
Yeah,
but
I didn't actually catch it,
Well,
Cliff.
I'm
Do you
plus-
actually see us moving here or is it all frozen?
look at this.
I see all of you, but the screen isn't doing anything.
Okay, so nobody's moving, it's frozen?
No, there's nothing there. Just says Town of Berlin, and then I can see the image of all of you. I'm going to find it on the FinCom drive.
It looks like you have. Cancel, okay. I tried to open Zoom again to see if it would bring the screen up. Because it was frozen like that.
So she has two going up. That's what's stopping it
All
right
right.
now.
So make this one the host.
That's what I was
That's
just
what
about
she
to
said.
do.
Which one is this? This is me.
Yeah,
Oh, you can't.
reclaim
wait,
host.
Okay,
And
and
then
then just
log me
leave,
off.
yeah, just leave this.
And then log back in.
Yeah.
Right.
You love the meeting, okay.
This is what people were doing 5 years ago, trying to figure out how this worked.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Got a little PTSD going on
Alright,
right now,
let's
just so you
do
know.
this. Perfect. Thank you.
And
I
I
can get to
crumble into
it.
this.
Yes, thank you. I can get to it from the meeting, like I have to go in this way, otherwise it logs me in. Thank you, everyone, for your patience during our technical difficulties.
maybe, I don't know if you have it there, I was trying to quickly find, what was the, from our budget that you presented on February 12th, what was the BMS operating assessment at that time? Do you happen to have that?
I don't have that in front of me.
Actually, I have it.
I actually have it if you need.
Higher.
Nice.
You're looking for the February 11th one?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Kristen.
but,
You're
okay,
welcome.
actually, it looks
Thanks,
like it
Brittany.
was here, it was 4,993,000. It was 4,990,000, it dropped from 5,271,000 to 4,993,000. And now the number you have, we have is 4,512,926.
Okay. Yep.
Okay,
So as you can see, we've been really, as
Yes.
when we left here, he asked us to sharpen our pencils and we certainly have done.
Yeah.
And again, lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of work with our principals, our directors, our school committee to make sure that we got a budget that we believe in. This is what we need to run our school district for the fiscal year 26.
okay.
You want me to walk us through a little bit now that this is working?
Yes, now that you have that up.
All right, so I just call your attention to the box that I kind of highlighted in gray here. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. But basically what I do is I make a budget recommendation, then I pass it on to the select board. They vote on it, which they did on almost every line item, I think, except for two on Monday night. And then the FinCom looks at my recommendations, the select board recommendations, and they ultimately vote on the budget that goes to town meeting. So when we look at where we're at here, and we've talked about the new funds, if you will, we're really, if we use Prop 2.5 as our example and not talk about the excess levy just for a moment, plus our new growth, we were at $577,913 approximately in new funds for FY26. And Scott was a little more precise than me. The schools represent 53% of the budget, combined Assabet and Berlin-Boylston, and the town is 48%. Am I? Yeah. 47, thank you, percent of the budget. So we looked at kind of, I just did it 50-50. I know I'm a little bit off, but kind of looked at where we'd be at if we split revenues proportionally, new revenues between schools and town, and that would mean about 288,000 for each. The town budget requests were $361,401. I scaled those back by $73,166, and last night the select board scaled this back even further. They took out approximately another $120,000 off of the town side last night. So the increase, I'm just speaking about my budget recommendation right now because they still have a few more line items to vote on. But the Assabet increase is set at $163,965. The operating increase on the assessment side for us from what we were paying in 25 is $570,992 for Berlin-Boylston. And then obviously the debt increase from 24 to 25 is higher for the assessment, not for the actual what the debt was as we've discussed. So that was $90,948. So that gives us a total increase of just over $1.1 million for the budget of FY25 over 26. So where does that leave us when we come to the fact that we have excess levy capacity as a town? What that means is we would need to basically raise the difference in funds. And I'll scoot down here, and I deleted that for a reason I'll show you. So right now, in order to fund all of the operating revenues and the debt from Berlin-Boylston plus Assabet plus the town increase at the 288, which as I mentioned, we've lowered, that would reduce our excess levy down to $720,150. So what we would have to do is raise taxes and you can see where we're at right here with our deficit, in that we have 17,400,237 in revenues and 17,934,527 in expenses. So what I've had to do is add an additional $534,290 to property taxes out of that excess levy capacity.
Sure.
Because as we always explain, but I'll say it again for anyone who's watching, that's not money sitting in a bank somewhere. That's just extra capacity because we don't tax to the max. So that's taking that extra funding. And the reason why those numbers are slightly different is because our debt exclusion number goes up a little bit. So that's the difference of about 6,700 between the excess levy used, because it goes up slightly and then you take that 534,000 out of it. So what does that mean in terms of values? And I really don't love estimating potential tax increases, because with Berlin having a split tax rate, having constant commercial devaluation with Solomon Pond Mall, we just settled an ATB case and they have filed another abatement this year because the value just keeps going down over there. And obviously what happens is that burden gets shifted over to the rest of the taxpayers on the mostly on the residential side. We also are only able, if we're estimating what this $1.1 million in additional property taxes levied means, we're only able to base it off of the current tax rate because we don't know what the FY26 tax rate will be. We also don't know what the select board is going to vote for the shift between what we charge residential versus commercial in that split tax rate. We don't know new growth. There's a lot of variables. So with throwing all of that out there, I will say that I could be off by several $100 plus or minus. But right now where we stand, we're at about a $700 increase on the average single family home on the 25 value, which is valued at $659,000. Now, obviously, if your home is worth more than $659,000, your increase is more. If it's worth less, it's less. Now, last year we thought we were at 700 and we ended up more like 9. So I give that caveat again. I could be low, I could be high, but I know everybody wants to know, what does this mean for me in terms of my taxes? The best number I can give is an approximate $700 on an average single family home. Now, that's not condos or anything else or multifamily. That's single family home valued at $659,000.
What is the percentage increase in the levy to based on that number? So the original number, we had an increase of the levy. We start with the standard 2.5%. And what is the percentage increase in the levy for that?
So if let's just take my little formula over here that I was doing. Let's do 26 and 25. And that'll give us that difference. So if we do, gotta love my math on the spot, everybody. Makes me a little nervous every time I do it, but I'm trying.
I do exactly the same thing.
I'm like, breathe.
But not necessarily on a live webinar.
Yeah, I know. Now I know how poor
Oh,
kids feel,
sorry, I didn't
right?
get
When
new
their
growth.
teachers are walking around the
Hold
room.
on. That's why it's off, because I don't have new growth. Hold on. Yes, I usually do numbers in the morning. It's about approximately a 7.36% increase in taxes raised in FY26 over the taxes raised in FY25. And we have had significant increases in the last few years, and I'm just going to undo this math so I can show you this. We had a 7.49% increase from what taxes raised in FY24 to 25, and a 6.88% increase in taxes raised from 23 to 24. Now, if you compare that to where we were at in 22 to 23, that was only a 1.95% increase.
Yeah.
So there have been much larger than quote unquote normal or typical in the previous more COVID years, if you will. I didn't go back further than that. I can, but I just went back 3 years for now, just to give you an example.
Kristen, can you repeat what the increase 22 to 23 was? What was that percentage?
1.95%.
Thank you.
And all I do to do that is I literally take once we set the tax rate and we do the recap, I take what we actually levied in property taxes, and that's what went out on the tax bills to the taxpayers. Take that number over the previous year's number, you get the total dollar increase of the budget and then the percentage year over year from that. So we had about an increase of $251,000 in FY 23. In FY 24, it was just over $905,000. And in FY 25, it was $1,052,935. Sorry, I didn't round that year. The extra digit in there threw me off.
Okay.
I mean, so Kristen, at the spreadsheet you were showing.
Yes.
Showed that sort of a 3.5% increase with new growth gave us about $730,000, $729,000 potentially that we could play with. And I think after the cuts that Peg and I at least recommended
Yep.
at select board, I thought the town increase was now closer to about 100,000 or so.
That I wasn't able to get the total yet, but you did take 100,000 on health
Right.
insurance alone. And then several other tens of thousands out of other line items.
So I thought the town increase was near about 140 or 150,000 at this point.
Okay.
And so like if we could,
Shall we
personally, just
put that
from
number in
a
for-
one person sort of standpoint, is that somehow if sort of the school increases were in that 600,000 range or less, I think that gets us on an operating side. Now, I don't know how we do capital because as you see, we have 360 and we have 311 sort of
Sure.
spent, and asking the schools to do 11,000 is probably not appropriate, but that there's not a ton sitting there for that.
Right, and I did do out the free cash plan for those of you who are interested in just seeing what that looks like. And again, this is a plan. It is not set in stone. We can deviate from it, but we do have a few special articles at town meeting that will use free cash. We also have, the 360,000, which is the up to 30% for the capital plan. Our stabilization is actually doing pretty well. And I know the select board talked about perhaps not putting free cash into stabilization this year to free up a little more free cash. The select board also talked about putting 50,000 into OPEB instead of the 120, as we really just have to show progress towards that funding. And we do have 85,000 right now in OPEB. But the one thing that I'm pretty firm on is you really always want to carry over not less than 25%. So that's a minimum of $300,000 that we would want to carry over year. You get less than that 25 carryover, DOR starts to get a little nervous.
So can I ask you just a clear, do you have a capital plan? Because,
We do. Yep. So this is the town's capital plan.
and if you showed it earlier, I apologize.
No. That's fine. I think I gave you the number, but I didn't show you what it was.
Looks a lot like ours.
So the key is the right-hand column, which is the funding source. So anything that says public safety mitigation does not hit free cash, which would basically be police and fire. Sorry, I told you, Scott, I was going to sit back and.
No, that
No.
was me.
No,
I'm
I'm doing the same thing though.
blocking.
So when this all works out, that's where you get the bottom line of 311,085 in
So-
town requests.
So there's no school in that point, is that
Nope.
correct? Is that what I'm
This
saying?
is just the town.
Yeah.
We do ours really early, in December. So I had this built out back then. So you got your own special spreadsheet. But I use the same format. I just throw your numbers in once I have them.
Sure.
So,
And we can share our long-range capital plan
Sure.
with you, where it's a bit of
That
a
would
work
be
in
great.
progress. So we haven't, I mean, as I'm sure yours is as well, you kind of deal with things as they come in some ways, but
Sure.
we're
We-
trying
we
to do
do.
better about planning things out.
Well, and I think we arguably could do so as well. I mean,
Yeah.
you see, you have a few departments that are
Sure.
doing it. You have others where it's a more kind of immediate need because some of those have been carried over year to year and not funded. So they're really, kind of looking at the immediate need. The library is a little challenging because they're on the precipice right now of looking at what do we do with the library and do we expand? Do they apply for Mass Library's grant to do a quote unquote larger library? So they don't want to put too much money into that existing building other than things that really need to be done. And police do typically, a couple of the communications pieces every year, which would be like the mobile data terminals, the radar, guns and things like that. So those typically get spread out on a 5-year plan, like the cruisers as well.
Sure. We had a conversation with Boylston on Monday, right? And we talk about Tohoto as being one of our newest buildings, right? And we take great pride in it, and it does, but it's starting to get to that point where things are starting, right? It's getting older. And
Yeah.
there are things that we're not sure at any time, we need to be concerned about and worried about as well, too. So we talked about in the future of having sort of like a capital stabilization, a funding for Tohoto, that we can be prepared in case something does happen as the building starts to get older.
And we do have a capital stabilization fund for Assabet.
Yeah.
Correct?
We do.
So
and
it's just a flat dollar amount we give every year in the school. They can sometimes take more out of that fund and sometimes take less.
They started it last year and I believe they put in $250 per year, $250,000 across all the schools. Our portion is like 15,000, I think.
So
I'd have to
it's
look,
definitely a
but-
conversation we'd like to have
Yeah.
with you in the future about having that, like
Yeah.
a rainy day account, right?
Yeah.
In case something goes, the boiler, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We're
But then
never,
the town also has a capital stabilization
Yeah.
fund.
Yes, we do.
And how much is in that fund?
Ask me that question.
Yeah.
I don't have it handy.
I
at
don't
the
think it's much,
moment.
because I think we've only had it for a couple of years. So it's not like it's
Yeah, I
Yeah,
want to
sure.
say it's around like,
it is. And so it was talking about putting $120,000 into that, but
right.
it
I'll
could be we
look up
don't
that
add more to
number.
that fund and instead we put it in current year capital, or in some respects, we don't add to the fund and we take out of the fund if it's, if we think it's a higher than normal capital year.
Yeah, I'm working on the warrant. Unfortunately, the accounting office is closed this week and part of last week. So once I can get those updated numbers, I'll get the capital numbers, the capital stabilization, general stabilization, and I know OPEB because we've only funded it for 1 year.
And so one of my concerns, and again, just as one person on one of the boards, is that the school's now sort of insisting that it's all one pool and one number. How do we get some assurances that if we gave you, $300,000 for capital at improvements at Berlin Memorial, that it actually goes to capital improvements at Berlin Memorial?
So we have the capital money split out. I mean, we could show you the spending on capital in particular. We segregate. I mean, that's one, our budget kind of mashes together a little bit, our operating, but we still keep things separated, but our capital is very distinctly segregated into three completely separate funds. So Tohoto Capital is one fund. We can show you the expenses out of that. I think at some point, we're still we're in a similar boat as you, trying to get our books closed. But I mean, as soon as that's done and we roll over balances, we can talk about, if anything's sitting on some balances as well. I can't speak at the moment to whether there are fund balances in those accounts at the moment, but we could definitely start looking at whether some of that, because of some of the debt challenges for the past couple of years, we may have drawn more out of that than intended in some ways as well, though. But if there's a fund balance available, we would definitely in the future be looking to, things sometimes come in less than we expect, right? And I honestly wouldn't come to you on the low end of what we think something's going to cost, because I don't want to say I'm going to repair a roof and then not be able to repair the roof, right? So we're gonna try to come, and those savings, we would absolutely plan on giving back to you in terms of not needing that capital in the future. So we would be happy to maintain that obligation.
And the requirement for sort of one vote across, $1 amount across everything, is
Mhm.
that do we know if that's a state requirement or is that something in the regional agreement? Could we have a regional agreement that said that we vote separately on operations versus capital?
So I go back to that last slide we had, right? And I think it's really pertinent. We revisit our regional agreement as a
Yeah.
group and look at that.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, and I know that came up, I heard it maybe once or twice in my short time being here. Rest assured that the capital money that you're giving us for Berlin, Memorial will be used in Berlin Memorial, and we'll be able to document and show all
In terms of sources, I mean, I think, so the prior district I came from, I mean, they voted operating and capital separately for things. They actually had a similar arrangement with the towns owning the buildings. The elementary buildings, they handled the capital in the elementary buildings, and then we had a regional middle high school. They still insisted on voting the capital for the the high school rather, is just the high school separately. So it was some of the challenge with that is if one town votes one number and another town votes another number, you end up in a little bit of a pickle with that, or they don't want to fund something. We had one or two of those, so we had to go with a lower number, right? We went with a lower amount. To whatever degree possible, I think I'm individually, and that the state, I don't think the state is actively monitoring this. I'm agnostic to where your money comes from. I mean, I've jokingly said, I mean, if you guys want to take up robbing banks, it's not my problem. I'm joking a little bit, and I don't want people to take that as my suggestion, but I don't, wherever your funding comes from, I'm pretty agnostic to. I'm worried about kind of my own funding and my own money in the schools. So,
and similar to the same conversations you're having with the fire and the police and all that, we're having those same conversations with Lisa Tahanto and John Campbell in Berlin, right? Making those decisions as well too. They're tough decisions to be making. But again, going back to that question you asked, but absolutely the funding that you give us for capital for Berlin Memorial will be used at Berlin.
Yeah, but interesting thing to bring up on the one line item, because if there was, for example, looking at capital coming out of stabilization, which requires a 2/3 vote, all of a sudden it becomes messy by having one number. All right, because if you have one number, does that mean if you combine together and you brought something out of stabilization, the whole thing requires a 2/3 vote? I mean, obviously I'm not looking for an answer here, but
Yeah.
that's where it gets be complicated. So it does make sense where like a capital item is a separate item, so you do have that more of that flexibility to handle those situations. Otherwise, it'd be coming down to, you probably would say you would never take it out of stabilization, which if there was a need for it, would be not a good thing to be excluding
that
that.
speaks directly to the rationale from my prior district. They didn't want a single capital item to kill the entire budget and then having us have to take multiple votes and go into situations like that. So they chose to, if anything was going to get killed, it would be the capital item, and then we'd either deal with a lower number, or we just have to refigure that. But at least the operations was covered, and I think that would be kind of our priority is can we get operations covered and then move from there. The other is, I mean, I know, we're coming up against sort of a deadline to post a warrant for you all. To what degree, I think we're going to try to take a vote at the
Tuesday.
meeting next week. As things change, if we came up, I don't want, I don't think any of us wants to be in that situation where we're deliberating on the floor of town meeting, or not I wouldn't be, but if, I've had a number a week before town meeting that everyone agreed to, and we all came in and we made an amendment on the floor of town meeting that everyone agreed on. There wasn't deliberation. It's just boom, done. I've done that, and that, typically, especially if it's got to be a lower number. We can't come after this with a higher number. So that's kind of, you know, where we all also stand is.
And back to your part, you're bitching about the capital, like that's a conversation we'd want Wilson to be involved with as well too, right? So
Right.
we're looking at a whole regional agreement, right? And memorializing that. That's what we did in our previous district. It was memorialized in there. So when we're not here, right, it's still going on. That's the best practice that we want to use. So
Okay. Are we done with the capital piece? I want to actually jump back to the operating budget.
Sure.
Because something is amiss from when we were discussing this a couple of weeks ago.
Which page?
And
Sorry.
go to, first of all, I want to look at where you have, ignoring capital, looking at the numbers that you had, what was at least presented here, the operating assessments in there. You don't have to have the cuts or the very latest cuts that you just, or at least the select board
breakdown?
did from the town. But what was at the 2.5%, I mean, starting with the starting levy, no, the 2.5% added to the levy, what's the deficit that we have right now? Is that deficit 385,059? If you're only doing 2.5% on the levy?
We made this nice little chart the other night, so I can just 2.5 plug this in. 536, 227 was your deficit. of
Using,
2.5.
if it was 2.5%. And I think we had looked in there that the, well, you can see the two, just go, actually. you
Sorry,
have-
Cliff, I'm not sharing. I'm sharing now. Hold on. I heard. Okay, there we go.
Okay, and then you had the on line 246, right at the bottom there, it's just a, we have the
Yep.
2.5% increase. Basically, that 2.5% increase resulted in revenue of 377,913. So that estimated new funds there of 577,913, 377,913 are coming from the increase in the levy.
Right, and new
Right.
growth is 200,000, which.
Right. So if you increase, so first of all, if you increase the levy by another 2.5% here, obviously it's another 378,000, which
So you're saying
takes.
5%?
Yeah, I would just, yeah, if it was, just try to get what the number is here, because did you not have a number of showing that was 7.5%? Showing that if you close the deficit, it would be 7.5%. Did I miss that, right? Because it doesn't, that seems high. Yeah, 7.36%. That seems high because if you go back, just go back to there. If you did 5%, add another 377,913 or whatever number you want to use in the you see where
New growth is 200,000, so a 5% increase would be $900,000 in extra revenue. I think if she scrolls down her chart, because her chart does go this high,
Mhm.
to 7.5,
Yep,
you're sort of that 1.3 at 7.5, so 7.3 would be a little bit less than $1 million or so, and you add the 200,000, you're getting close to what the total request would be.
right. So So at
I think the numbers
5%,
work.
at 5%, we still have a deficit of 158,000, correct? So, it's not,
Again, 200,000 on what is the town administrator's recommended budget. The select board has already cut
yes, I
$200,000.
understand, right, I understand that, but I was just saying, it's like the 7.36 is still gonna be high because basically, what if you put in the number for 5.5%? Right, so it's actually between 5.5 and 6%.
I think it's because new growth, this is where I think the confusion's coming in. New growth is a property tax
It
increase, so
a-
you have to look at the whole.
Well, right, but property tax, but thing is, we're looking at the increase on the existing taxpayers, right? I mean, you bring in, somebody builds a new house, somebody builds a new garage, they do whatever additions to that. They're increasing, that's a new growth that's unique, right, in the same situation. I think we really need to be talking about what the increase is on the people that just did nothing. You're not talking, I mean,
So
granted. that-
subtracting new growth.
Yeah, I
from-
think, right, even all those, using all those levy numbers are showing over the past years
Okay.
are excessively high. I mean, not,
These include new growth.
Yeah,
right?
when they
So you
include new
have to-
growth,
And because
yeah,
that's the
it's-
way DOR
yeah, but it's
presents
also
their
very,
numbers.
I mean,
They include it.
I mean,
They're
if
making
you
it-
had enough new growth that's offset your entire any increase in your budget, you'd be saying this and your average taxpayer saw a zero increase. It's not I just want to see more, I don't think the numbers are, they'll make people panic of what their tax bill increase will be because we're basically jumping up higher than they should be.
Right, although I think if we, because I worry these levels of nuances is what drives people away from trying to even follow what's going on. I think it is just simpler to say the budget right now looks like it's going up 7.3%, because even your nuance, Scott, doesn't actually take into effect the impact that's going to have of what we might do with the commercial tax rate and the split, the value of commercial tax rates, the reevaluations that are happening in the town. There's so many nuances that go into changing this number that I like just going on, the total budget is going up by X. And that is a simple number that people can understand, that we used to spend $100 and now we're spending $107. Because I think that we start getting into all these nuances, because I also hate just even talking about levy limit at all, because that also glazes people's eyes over. I think it's simple to say the current proposed budget looks like it's going to go up 7.3%. And I think it's our group around the table, and I sort of look to the schools as well, because you guys are half of the budget, of how we figure out how do we get that number just lower. Because lower is lower. If we got that to 6%, whatever you're paying is less than it would be if it was 7.36%.
What is the overall budget increase, though? Again, that's not representing, that's only the levy increase.
So the total. That's,
Which is,
yeah, you'd have to do your totals here over. Let's see, so 17, so you're going from a $17.1 million budget to a $17.9 million budget. You didn't have much in local receipt growth and less in new growth to offset that. And state aid is actually going down $2,000 as of right now. So. And I swear my dyslexia sets in at this hour and I always get that calculation backwards when you're trying to do the percentage. Is it the old divided by the new?
So you'll have that's a 4.7% budget increase.
No, that's not right. Because it's a.
it's actually the difference.
that way?
It's the difference divided by the older number.
Thank you. Why is it? Oh, because it's not in
so convert it to a
percentage. Yep,
percentage,
I gotta
yeah.
convert it. Like I said, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got a little nervous. Percentage.
Yeah, and you could add another decibel, because I think you'll make it's a high 4 as opposed to a low.
Yeah, it'll
5.
be a 4.7 if you do.
Add a
that extra
couple.
decimal.
4.77.
Yep.
So that's your overall budget increase, but that does not reflect the tax
Right.
increase.
Well, that's what I was like, I mean, one thing you said too is like, what's the budget increase? You said 7.6, it's not going up 7 points. So I
Right.
mean, there's so many things here
So many
that,
ways to look.
Right.
At it.
and whoever
So-
wants to panic people and whatever, or basically downplay a situation, they'll use whatever numbers they want to use. I like to just put out as many as possible. And to me, it's like the biggest thing is if people are just living in their home, they don't do any changes, what's that impact?
Right,
gonna
which we
be on
can't
that?
tell because we don't know what the split's going to be, and we don't know what
Yes.
capital versus housing is going to be, and we don't know what revaluation is going to be. And so this is why I try to stay away from saying those sort of things, and why year after year, when people ask for that number, pointing out that all the things that go into the tax rate, many of which are not set till October or November, you know, you can't say what that number is going to be because someone will say, oh, we said during budget process, it's going to go up by $500. And so I planned $500 and it really went up by 200 or it really went up by 900. You know, it just, it is difficult to do. Because even Kristen's is like the average home, assuming the tax rate, it's just, you get too many asterisks on it to make it sort of
And I didn't even
realistic.
mention the reval,
Right.
which will likely take place in 27, but we do have DOR out here now, and they did make us do some adjustments even in 26 or 25 and
Yep.
26, so.
So you guys can appreciate the budget process we're going through, right?
Yeah,
Our
absolutely.
governor's budget's not even done yet, right? We're not sure of that.
Right.
Municipalities are a little
Right.
bit different, right? They they have time to do us, but we're also, I need that time limit, that 45 days as well too, so.
And what I might ask is like in September, maybe October, we'll wait till you get the October 1st school numbers, but we like the chart of like what the percentages for Tohoto should be known by the early part of November, because that is just a math formula based on October 1st enrollment. Average over several years, I get that part, but you know the October number.
Sure.
And so we'll get a sense whether
And
our
it's
Tohoto is
not
going
just-
up a little bit or down.
It's not just based on our October number. So the foundation, but the foundation enrollment also includes charter and choice students. So we have to wait for those reports to come out. I believe those come out in December.
Yeah.
January.
Oh,
And
we
when
can
that
still
comes
have them
back,
relatively
we-
early in the
We
budget.
could relatively, we could take a guesstimate, but those numbers, there are a fair number of choice and charter
And the
kids.
other thing we could agree upon in September is what the heck is the starting number? Because for 2 years in a row, there's been disagreements on the starting number.
starting numbers in
Okay.
schools?
No, the starting number of the budget. So
Oh,
when we
okay.
talk about a percent increase over what number?
Sure.
And for 2 years in a row, there's been a disagreement between the town and the schools on what that number is.
Right.
And I don't need to rehash how we
Yeah.
got there, but I think we should have a September meeting where we sit down saying, when we do the budget, the starting number that we're basing the percent increase on is X.
Fair enough.
Well, I think what we're trying to commit to is that we will not alter assessments without also altering budget. I think that's what kind of happened is I think there was an agreement to reduce assessments and there wasn't a voted budget in accordance with that, which left things in limbo. So we're gonna really, regardless of timing, if we make an adjustment that even is made on the floor of town meeting, I think the commitment though needs to be the school committee needs to vote a budget that's in line with assessments that everybody can understand is transparent.
So Aaron, to pick up Scott's comment.
Yeah.
What you said is about last year, which is 2 years.
Yep.
The previous year, we also had a similar issue.
Sure, sure. I appreciate that.
And I
So
raised the
September,
question
October.
again that I raised in December, given the state of
Mhm.
what we know about the last 2 years in finances in the schools. Do we really know what it costs? Right? And to follow on that, are we getting closer to closing out fiscal 24?
Working on.
I don't mean to
I
be-
can't
I
promise.
certainly, I don't
anything.
want to nag you, you're doing a great job,
yeah.
but I'm
Yeah.
very curious to see
Yeah.
where we land with that, because we're working on a lot of assumptions here. They may or may not be valid. Right, they have, I don't need to have it close, I just have it pointed.
Sure, yeah.
There we go, yeah. So when I look at the town numbers and I look at what's happening here, it's like, not so good. Can I go and ask Aaron about my favorite topic, which is the offsets, what I call revenues that the school might apply and did apply in this budget?
Sure.
And remember slide 11 is my favorite slide, right, which talks about that.
Gosh,
that-
my
yeah.
favorite slide.
Yeah,
That's
really.
exciting.
Favorite slide is, well, it's, budget offsets.
It's
right?
nice. There's a favorite slide. Yeah,
Well,
sure.
they're good.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
so when I look at what's here, some of the money in slide 11 was then applied to offset budget, or is this what's left after?
All of this was used to
All
offset
of that was
budgets.
used to
Yes,
offset,
yes, yes.
okay.
So the budget you see has these built into it as offsets. Yep.
All right.
School choice is higher than we'd like it to be, but we understand that E&D isn't certified yet. So there will be some money in E&D that would then be able to be used either this year or next year
So
to further offset.
I might have asked this question already.
Mhm.
Does school choice follow where the seats are,
In terms of,
where you apply the offset?
not to my knowledge, there's no accordance in the regional agreement for that.
there's nothing in practice or in regulation that would say do that, so you're. It's
No, so we're
just
trying to,
available.
we're
Okay.
trying to utilize it in an equitable manner.
So, and then I go back to our friends in Boylston and their number, the increase needs to be at 500,000 or less. And I look at Berlin's increase, it's higher than that. And then when I look at
Mhm.
slide 24, Boylston's budget, we've got a round number, 100,000 of school choice used to offset health insurance.
Mhm.
Anyway, Berlin can get 100,000 to offset health insurance. on
They
our-
do have that to offset health.
Well, we
insurance.
have, I
If
think we
it-
have
if I
circuit
haven't
breaker.
written
I
it in there.
don't remember any school choice.
You have exactly the same amount offsetting, so it should be it actually should be 200 to 200 and 450. So 200 to Berlin Memorial, 200 to, in the actual budget itself. Let me see, so
So-
if you go,
Yeah, if I compare slide 24 and slide 21.
so if you go to slide 6. You will see I'm using 200,000 of school choice funds to offset that health insurance. So it's actually the health insurance looks like a negative number in there. It used to be used to offset salaries in places, but that's a really tedious and not really worthwhile practice. It's easier to use it on a fixed number. People move around, so if I applied school choice to Joe and Joe switches,
Sure,
transfers schools or leaves or whatever, it's much easier. You just pick an expense
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
best is to
Yeah.
use a
And
fixed
Okay.
expense.
We've seen
That's fine.
Assabet also use
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, same thing.
Do you see that though, what you said?
Yeah.
Where that's applied?
Yeah.
Yes, I see
Okay,
it.
just
on
wanna make
my-
sure
for clarity on that, yep.
Six.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
In one of the previous versions of the budget, I realized I had applied, you kind of play around with numbers, right? I had only applied 100,000 to Berlin Memorial and 200,000 to
Sure.
Boylston, and I fixed that when I noticed it.
So when I look at slide 24 on Boylston and I look at slide 7,
That's 724.
21.7, so
Mhm.
one's got 100,000 school choice, the other has 200,000 school
Yep,
choice.
so the
What's the-
81,865, that is the total of your out of district tuitions. So the 48,000 is in, I think, anticipated school choice out charges. Which I can't apply circuit breaker towards, so I'm using it towards out of districts. It's hard to go above that number. I guess I could apply an additional amount.
Yeah, I'm lost.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which slide are you talking about?
So you mentioned what slide did you refer to?
Boylston 7 and Boylston 24.
Boylston
there's
7 and
School
Boylston.
choice applied on both of those, and it's a different amount.
Okay, that may be, and 24. Oh, so I apologize. Yes, so it was actually Boylston that I had only applied 100,000 of school choice to off. So one of the two, and since the last iteration, I increased it by 100%, 100,000 to the Boylston side. So it was inequitable between Berlin and Boylston. So I apologize. I knew I adjusted one of the two schools. It was Boylston that I had errantly only put 100,000 instead of 200,000 towards in a prior version. So Berlin was correct. Boylston was low.
So is this slide 24 incorrect? It says.
24 is correct because in the prior iteration that I had shared, I had only used 100,000 of school choice as an offset. And in the intervening period, I realized that and changed that to 200.
Do you have 24 in front of you there? Because the number for savings is 100,000.
Yes.
So
Since the prior iteration, it increased by 100,000.
Okay.
Yes, since the
If you
prior
look at February
iteration,
11 or something,
it
you would see
increased
it.
by, yes. So the
Okay.
February 11th was missing 100,000 that I had intended to equalize those two. I had inadvertently not equalized those two.
Any other questions?
Anybody have anything? Cliff, do you have any questions?
I've got a question. What can you do to take down that operating number? Because,
we,
you know,
I mean, I guess, you know, what I'd like, I think we'd like to do is continue to work on it. You know, I know that, you know, there's something that would have to be in a warrant that, you know, we're hopefully going to vote. We're gonna do everything we can to take that down in the next couple days. But even, you know, I think I'm happy to have another one of these conversations if Al is on board, and, you know, whatever we come up with by next week, a commitment that we're gonna work together
Right.
and keep pushing this, you know, straight up to the end.
Yeah.
You know, this is still, I mean, I hate to say it, but this is still relatively early in terms of what we know and don't know.
That's right.
Which is a challenge. We could have a high cost out of district student move out. We could have a high cost out of district student move in.
We have experienced that. You
Yes.
know what that looks like.
And that's the April 1st dilemma. So, you know, anytime we're voting a budget before April 1st, I've got my fingers fully crossed. You never know what the House and Senate are gonna do with the
Sure.
governor's budget. Last year, they actually brought up Chapter 70 for hold harmless districts. I don't think we're hold harmless, but a number of hold harmless districts had a bit of a windfall in the sense that their Chapter 70 went up pretty significantly.
Sure.
Mhm.
I asked that question because we have a debt situation too. We're playing a little bit of catch up, so that's hitting both towns.
Yeah.
And we're kind of murky on the last 2 years and what did we actually spend?
Yeah.
And so that's why I asked that question. Can't we work on that operations number? Because it strikes me as high, and
Yeah.
you know, I looked at an analysis on what we're doing with net school spending and
Mhm.
we're way up.
Sure.
You know, we were running,
Mhm.
if the minimum local contribution, then you have the above.
Yep.
And the total is the net school spending, and
Mhm.
proportionally, Berlin's been much higher than Boylston, and there could be a lot of factors, but
Yeah.
that's a fact.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, for across the district, we were at 3 years ago, and in previous years when we were fully regionalized, we were running somewhere about 150 over the minimum local contribution for our net school spend.
Sure.
In the last 2 years, we've jumped up to over 170%
Sure.
of the minimum local contribution.
Right.
So, you know, again, I ask that, and that's next to comparable districts, it's a very high number, that net school spend. So you know,
I just want
I
to,
just have to, you know, I have to ask
Yep.
to look at that operating number,
Sure.
do what you can, because I think there's a lot of uncertainty,
Yeah.
you know?
so I push back a little bit of the uncertainty that we have with this budget. We were pretty specific with this budget, right? And making
Yeah.
very strategic cuts and reallocations. I mean, I know different than the fire and police are here fighting, right? Not fighting, but, you know, trying to get what we need to run our facilities, right? And run our schools. And so we made some really strategic moves here. And again, we still have that unknown factor, sort of like you guys have, of negotiations with our teachers union. So that's a piece that's weighing on us as well too. But we're also trying to make sure we provide everything that our kids need and that our teachers have, so we can provide that high quality education. We're not coming to you here. Like I said at the beginning, we're cutting art, we're cutting phys ed, we're cutting music, and then have everyone in the background, you know, all the parents, you know, coming with pitchforks and complaining about that. That's not what we're trying to do here.
Thank you.
We're trying to work
Thank you.
together, and we're being really specific
Okay.
about these cuts. So we will. To answer your question, we're looking at it more after coming from Boylston and Berlin, but I also want to make sure we're providing a high quality education as well too.
So I'm sorry, but you know, when I look at the budget, I do hear you, Al, and thank you for keeping it on track. Keeping people focused and trying to be factual there, but when we're looking at the dollar change or the percent change from the previous year, we're looking at the fiscal 25 budget. Because
Yeah.
we're not doing so well with what the actual fiscal 25 numbers are. We don't have the 24 numbers, right? So when we look at the change, how do we know? Because we don't know what, right? That's why I'm asking, can we work on that operating assessment? And I frankly, as others have said here, the public, people need to have some simple things that you can look at and hang on to. And I keep coming back to the two towns, and Berlin is roughly 2/3 in terms of student population relative to Boylston. And I keep looking at the numbers from that perspective and say, okay, our sister town here came in with a certain number. I really think ours ought to be lower. And I can't prove it because I'm in the same situation that Aaron's in, was we just don't have that. The last 2 years, we don't have that track record to run on. You go back 3 years, you start having other
Sure.
economic factors running.
Yeah.
And so I'd appreciate anything you can do.
We certainly, our goal over these next couple of days, to be honest with you, right? Couple of days is really looking at this a little bit closer. And making those decisions we need to make without impacting our, trying to maintain. So one of the best things about education is having teachers have professional learning and keeping and maintaining high quality teachers. And we certainly don't want our teachers to go elsewhere. So we want to be able to make sure that we're providing them a salary and we're providing them the things they need in their classroom, technology, and that's the most important thing for our kids. So to answer your question, we'll certainly go back and revisit this. That's the work we're going to do so we can be prepared for Tuesday night. But also there are things that we need to make sure that we're maintaining. So we run a high quality school district that we can be proud of, that we're all sitting here like we're looking at today. This is what we're doing, right? We're making sure that our kids have the things that they need so they can go off to go to either jobs or colleges and universities and come back to our community and work in our community and live in our community and help with the additional growth that's going to take place here.
Al, no argument. I see public education as the backbone of our
Agreed.
our civil
Agreed.
So,
our country.
Yeah, agreed.
So from my perspective, and whatever the school committee votes Tuesday night, and we're going to do our best before then, I think you have our commitment that we're going to continue working this budget, and anything we have and anything we can do, we will endeavor to bring to you, and if it means we amend, again, voting, the school committee voting and having a budget and the proper assessments. But if we do that days before town meeting, if we all agree to an amended number, we could propose that in the floor of town meeting, and it would never be higher. We can't go higher at this point. So
Understood.
But
I
you
think we're
wouldn't want
committed
anyone
to
else sitting in these seats that are here right now, besides us that are fighting for our kids, right? And fighting for our teachers. So that's what we're doing to make sure we're providing that. So, we're going to do our best. We're going to look at everything we possibly can look at without making huge cuts and without making huge impact on our teachers and our kids. I don't want 40, 50 kids in a classroom, right? That's what other communities are saying, right? And all parents getting that's not what's going to provide a good education for our kids. Sorry.
Right.
You get me going on that stuff. Sorry about that.
All right. So any other specific questions on the budget? Cliff, you're there. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm here. I'm listening. No question.
Okay, but no questions?
No
Okay.
question.
And anything from the select board members? Anything else? Okay, so thanks for coming in.
Oh, so we're not going to talk any specific numbers to get.
Or we're gonna work on, we gotta go through the thing. I mean, if they want to stay, they can definitely stay, but
So I thought the purpose of this was to give them some direction
Me
on what to
too.
bring back to the select board, bring back to the school board.
okay. all right,
And so, again, one person on one board. I think I personally could get behind a number that's close to the Boylston increase. So if you hit it about 500,000, I don't personally have a need for it to be lower, but I don't disagree. I don't disagree with your,
Debt plus capital, Tom. That's what I was told by the finance committee.
They break it out a
and-
little differently.
But that
Yeah.
500 includes the operating, the capital. and Tom.
right, there,
And-
whatever number on your slide says 484 and 570 for us. I would like our number near 500.
Closer to theirs.
Right.
Okay.
And then, my quick back of math
Yep.
sort of numbers for capital, trying to free up some free cash by not doing a few other things. Select Board has already voted to reduce the amount of money that we're recommending going into OPED. Because I don't, I mean, your non-grade items, I get that they're important. I'd love to see a number that is closer to like, 300 to 350
Yeah.
as opposed to the 450 is now, but I don't know what I would cut out of that. Although at the end of the day, we're going to give you a number. And so, if you can get one of those projects down a little bit, so you can get all three of them in, or two of them become more important. But it would be a number at least I could sort of get behind it. I was disappointed in some respects that the school board didn't remove the sort of the gray light items that are sort of a non-starter for us. It sounded
enough.
like not needed right now, that our negotiating numbers weren't starting at some of these lower numbers, but that at least that's the direction where I personally would go.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to, first of all, I mean, there's been changes that I don't even know what, that the town did. We haven't even put those into the numbers, or were those in the last numbers you had?
That's what I was just trying to do. The problem is there's some disagreement on some line items, so it's hard to get an overall number.
Okay, I mean, we need to, I mean, for me right now, it's gonna be a long meeting. And we need to go and work through those particular numbers and understand what they are. I don't think I don't see us having a number for you. I mean, get some people's individual opinions. I mean, if we want to go through that in the next 15 minutes, but I think it's going to be a long night as we work towards to understand, at least for me. I'm not going to put out any number. I don't even know what the numbers are right now. So I don't know, I mean, how, Heidi, do you have anything you want to say?
I think a good thing to send them off with is what Scott just said here.
Okay.
Trying to get closer to the Boylston number, or even a little bit lower if possible.
And if we could just ask you, and I know you're probably the long night ahead of you, if that should change, I know Krista and I talk or text each other on a daily basis. If you could let us know, because that's the work we're going to start first thing tomorrow morning, based on the number you're giving us here and the number we have in Boylston, to get ready for Tuesday night.
How about I email you in case it's really late, so
Sure.
a text message
Sure.
doesn't wake you up?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Try to be
you know
responsible.
how late I'm staying up. That was
Oh, I
but-
know, I
okay.
know.
Okay, but that would be helpful. At least we have a number that we can at least start the process tomorrow morning. If things should change, then
Well, I have one question, but I also want to make sure Cliff isn't lost here either. Is the Boylston, the budget, does it fit in the Boylston number they gave you?
What we have at the moment?
Yeah, for Boylston.
Probably not. Yeah, so we're looking to bring things down
Do you have a
in general.
general idea what number?
I'd have to look at it again. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I mean, I think we're gonna have to make some decent cuts. And figure some things
we
out.
had an admin meeting this morning with our directors and principals, and they know that, and they were waiting to hear what's going to happen tonight before we started making those. But
Okay, so then I was why I go to Cliff. Cliff, did you have any statements you want to make on it, or no support or whatever from either Heidi or Scott and Mary's comments?
Actually, I liked what you said, Scott. There's a lot of there's a lot
With
of,
Scott.
the chair of the finance committee, Scott. I like what you said about there are too many working numbers right now. There are a lot of things we need to look at tonight. There should be some clarity at the end. I don't know how clear it'll be, but I support that idea.
Yeah, so I think if anything, I mean, even if you don't walk out of here with that number, at least a
Yeah.
consensus number between the finance committee, we could have you that number by the end of our evening. But obviously, you're welcome to stay if you really want to
Okay.
stay.
I'm happy to reach out afterwards.
And you're looking also for the final date you gave us, Kristen, was April 2nd, was it?
The goal is to have everything finalized with the FinCom the evening of April 2nd and go to the printer April 3rd.
So that's why it's
That's our-
imperative for us to get in front of school committee on their meeting on Tuesday, right? To be able to make sure we hit your timeline. Boylston is a week later, but still we want to make sure, obviously we got to hit that timeline.
Okay.
So, let me just give you, because I've been trying to do this behind the scenes. If we do it's not the right number.
Are you sharing?
Yeah. Just don't rush too much here. We don't want to, last thing we want is a number to come out and we end up making a. have a-
Okay, so let me,
Figure it out,
let me put
please.
it to you this way then. Basically, if so Scott and Peg differed on a couple of line items, those being recreation and transfer station. If you were to make the full cuts that were discussed, eliminate the recreation department, eliminate the transfer station, you essentially have a level funded town budget from FY 25 to FY 26.
Level funded.
Meaning there is zero increase
Yeah.
from 25 to 26. Without giving you a precise number, you're just about, so you're basically eliminating all of the increase dollar amount.
So level funded doesn't mean level services.
Well,
That's
no,
right.
you're making
Correct.
cuts.
That's right.
Yeah. That means.
Right.
And what is it?
Because
It's,
we have the same things you do. Retirement goes up, health insurance goes
Right,
up, you know,
correct.
and so for us
Yeah,
to keep the
completely
budget at
understand.
zero,
That's right.
we had to cut services.
Yeah.
Right.
Level budget does not mean level service. That's
Yeah.
correct.
That, right.
and with the, excluding those that they didn't come to an agreement with, what was the overall increase then? Do you happen to
That's
have
what
that?
I was trying,
I thought it was like $90,000 to $100,000.
that sounds about
Yeah.
right. I can tell you the, let's see, recreation's
And-
budget
And
is,
although I wasn't obviously I was the one who's advocating for bigger
40,000.
cuts, the select board voted to not make those cuts.
but, well, you didn't
So-
have a majority, so you had,
A board of two, right? Fortunately.
I think a 1-0 vote
Mhm.
is a majority of those present. And so I believe those motions passed.
okay.
And as the person who didn't vote
Mm-hmm.
for it, I was totally fine with the outcome of that vote.
Okay, then I apologize. I
Why I
misunderstood.
abstained, so
Thank
it
you,
wasn't-
Scott.
So it wasn't a division where Peg and I had to do rock, paper, scissors.
Okay, so then if I put those two back in, that being the transfer station and recreation, those were the two that were disputed. Let's see where we get here. Make my magic on the fly math here. Yeah, you're talking 175 in
Okay.
cuts.
Yeah.
Is that's about where you were at, Scott?
Yep.
So another 175 in cuts, so that would take the 288 down another 175,000. So that would be about $113,000 increase. There's two line items you haven't voted on cultural council, which is a $1,500 line item. It's not a big one. And the building inspector one, I just reduced it by 7552 that the office, I was trying to do that behind the scenes, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we will let you'll
Appreciate it.
get an email
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. We know these are tough decisions you're making as well as the tough decisions we're making, but on behalf of us and the school committee, we thank you because we want to be proud of this budget, right? That, you know, when you're talking about increases, like we want to be proud of our education system we have here. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
I have to collect these because the art teacher will be mad at me. But
Yes, that's very
I'm
much.
sorry.
Understandable.
And hopefully they find their way back to.
They will. I'm on-
There it is. Get the people.
Tell them.
I can take a few
I
copies
know.
back to
Yeah,
the office if you'd like.
Yeah.
Did the updated ones with the extra pages.
Yeah, we gotta see, you
Okay,
gotta see
cool.
central office now. All we-
Yeah, the ones that Dee printed us
and everything, so
were
the one-
minus
we're working
the
on jobs
pages
every
that
day, right?
Aaron
So
had
it's great.
provided, like the following night.
Gotcha.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We didn't vote on building commissioner at the.
No, so
No,
when
we
I did
skipped it.
that math, I added it back in minus the 7552 that he said he could reduce by.
Right. And so,
Art there, Al?
I mean,
So
Heck,
I'm embarrassed to
I'm fine
say,
with the
because my
motion.
wife
Sure,
gives me
happy
all
to
these
vote.
beautiful briefcases, this is what
I
I'm
know.
traveling myself around with right there.
making the motion for the building inspector line item, what she has put in there. I think we still want to reevaluate it potentially for next year, but
Correct. Am I in your way?
No.
I didn't break it down between line items though. I just subtracted the 7552.
but he has a recommendation, and so
Yeah.
Because it has.
whatever
to
his
be
recommendation is that cut their total budget by $7,500,
Okay.
I am fine.
You
with it.
good?
Let's
Yeah,
go.
I'm good.
So I
Thanks,
would make
everybody.
that motion.
And
Thank you.
a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Boom.
Oh,
Wonderful.
Eight 53. Do you want to do cultural council at the same time? It's $1,500.
I know, I was thinking we'd spend 2.5 hours our next select board meeting on cultural council.
worry about it. I don't need help.
You know, I'm setting the agenda on Thursday. Be careful of what you wish for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So are you gonna stay for this, or?
I'll stay for that. We made some cuts and maybe hearing from us directly on why we made some of them.
Well,
or
yes, I think
Why I
we,
might want us to do deeper than the select board voted on. I can hang around a little bit longer.
okay, let's,
Where would you like us to start?
why don't we do this? Maybe Peg, you could move that, or that way, we could bring the,
TV.
bring it right up to us, sorry.
Sorry, that was a great save.
Or also, or you just want to bring it over there and then
Yeah,
Peg
so
does
you
have to
better
move.
on this
I
side.
don't know how long our cords are though.
don't have any plugs on that side of the wall. We do way down.
Well, see, that's why I was like sitting in the back.
Yeah,
Because there's a plug.
Push this down.
I know mine's dying too, but I'm okay with just seeing what's up there.
And mine is on my notes. I'm like,
So everyone can see it.
Yeah, maybe let's bring
I
it.
might set it.
Oh, close that way.
And if my laptop.
We don't have to
dies,
get
it's
right
not,
up to
so
the table, just
not big.
whatever
That's what I'm.
is reasonable, it's not.
It's up on the
disconnect.
big screen.
You Go right up into this little U here, that's probably good right there.
They're here?
Yeah, so everybody, can you see that?
I can.
Good.
And as long as Kristen remembers to share her screen, I'll see that.
And Cliff, please speak up and interrupt if I don't. I'm switching back and forth between so many things. All right.
Continue, I'm just gonna move chairs.
We want to start at the top? Is it better to start at the bottom? I know we kind of bounced around when we did it with the select board.
Well, why don't we just start with the big changes that the select board had recently made?
Okay, the cuts.
Yes.
All right, so
Is
the,
that fine with everybody?
I'm taking the lead for, this is my first budget process, so I'm taking the lead from you guys.
all right, so the first cut they made was here. The select board cut their stipends, so that is a cut of $4,017. That's all.
So the select board would be not receive any type of.
Correct.
So-called salary.
We also wiped out the salary for the Board of Health.
Okay.
Yep,
Which means we accidentally left one elected official that still gets paid
that's correct.
a whole $50.
Yes.
I do have a question on that. I know when there was always discussions with the OPEB, one of those cost savings, was there a change made that, like I know before it was health insurance could be an elected official that actually received money, but was that eliminated, officially eliminated, or?
Yeah, so elected officials, we took away health insurance for new elected officials a year or two ago,
Correct, or a change in position.
or a change of position. There's I believe that wiping out salaries also would potentially, some of the people who are still on it might not get it anymore.
Correct.
you have
If I
to-
understand
right.
correct, is they have to
Yes.
at least, you only fix $1,
Right.
in salary. So would there be any other negative thing where you can't do that because of, or you get a separate vote just for the,
It's something that we talked about. They're literally gonna wait until we're 3.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I didn't realize you had a mic.
Sorry.
One of the things I was gonna say, because that reduction or the elimination of salaries does eliminate the possibility of staying on health insurance, my recommendation is if you do for one, you should do for all.
Mhm.
So you might want to reconsider that because you're leaving one board
Yeah,
that's still allowed to get health insurance.
It only because we started further down the budget that I did, it's actually on my list to ask to be added to
Oh.
Monday's agenda, but we could actually make votes now.
Mhm.
And so the last elected official was the town moderator, correct?
Board of
Board of Health.
Assessors.
or of assessors?
All
and
board assessors get
auditors,
paid?
Mhm.
Yes.
They do.
Oh, I didn't know board of assessors got paid, or I would have put that in too.
Yep, 2540.
So I would then vote also to remove the salary for the board of assessors.
Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
I will second it. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye,
And then the moderator,
and
yes.
the moderator as well then. I moved that we reduce the moderator salary to 0 as well.
I will second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In some respects, this is for me, and even for some of the other tiny ones I did, is that this is not just reducing the salaries for a tiny dollar amounts. These are also payroll checks that don't have to be done. These are W-2s that don't have to go out. These are payments to retirement, to the whatever the tiny retirement fund that we had put money in. I mean, that this is trying to slowly, instead of increasing everyone's workload in town by, 1,000 cuts, trying to heal them one by one to potentially reduce the workloads of some of the administrative side of this town. And so every sort of line we get rid of, every single paycheck we reduce, every single thing we do less of, reduces the overall administrative burden and thus reduces, in some respects, those costs as well. It slows the growth in some of those departments.
Right, you basically reduce some exposure to health insurance.
Well, just not only.
Even if somebody's
the
not
amount
on.
of June's time in July to
Yeah.
cut those checks and in December to cut those W-2s and to figure out how much money is supposed to go into our retirement funds, that's all gone now.
So I'm putting your
Yep.
cuts in red.
Mhm.
'Cause
Yep.
thought that would make visually it a little bit easier here. You also reduced, the town administrator consulting budget from 20,500 down to 18,000. Obviously, we just talked about the assessor salary there. I think that might be the last cut. No, there's tax title. Hold on.
Well, there was the COA as well.
Yep, that comes
Later on.
Okay.
later on. Yep. Oh, you reduced fuel oil and
And electricity.
electricity further.
Just a point of order here. I'm not capturing these votes in the FinCom minutes.
You'd-
Should I be?
No,
No,
no, these are
You
select
don't
board
have to.
meeting minutes.
There's,
they took them on Monday or the previous Monday.
well, they just took a
So-
new.
We just took two
We
more
just took
votes,
two
right?
new votes.
Kristen, you're capturing the votes in your budget
Yes, I am.
draft. Okay.
And also I'm making a list here.
So I would just note the time for D, that it was somewhere around 8:50 that the motions were made.
Perfect, thank you. And those are it for the general government department or general government section of the budget, if you will. All right, as we keep going, I just threw this in expenses. This may actually, a little bit will come out of wages as well, but there is a $7,552 reduction in the overall building inspector budget that the building inspector has identified, as we were just discussing.
So 7,250.
7,552.
And that came when we asked about actually reducing that. I questioned the need for a building inspector in that it used to be sort of a fee for, as the permits came in. And when we started having a lot of new growth, it made way more sense to have it salaried and benefited. But as those numbers have gone down, whether or not it's better to go back, the answer is it's not a clear cut thing. And that potentially looking at some looking at it, sort of, it can't be something to really done by July 1, even if we wanted to do it early next year. And so we might spend some more time looking at it for next year's budget.
Didn't, in the past, didn't we have a hybrid of this? If there was a part-time salary and then fees, or was it just straight fees?
Yeah, there have been times where it's been like the percentage of fee is less, but there was a guarantee of, we've done some adjustments because it's not an easy position to fill. And
Right.
so we've done some adjustments, I believe, to allow us to be filled. And the current building inspector has done a great job for the town, is probably nearing retirement. He tried to retire once before, and I don't think we would let him.
Correct.
And so my guess is that topic comes back again at some points too.
That's why I asked about a hybrid arrangement, one of the
Yep.
reasons I asked.
All right, I got ahead while you were talking, so
that's
let me
good.
go back.
Yep,
All
I was
right,
trying to buy you time.
thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right, so that was building inspector. Then next we had the Board of Health.
Street
stipends.
lights we cut.
You did, I'm so sorry. Yes, reduce streetlights from 9,000 down to 4,000.
And what would that entail? Reducing
When
that?
I looked at the 2024 spending, we're spending about $3,500 a year on streetlights. And so I didn't think we needed to budget 9. But if it meant turning off some streetlights, then we should turn off some streetlights.
Okay, so basically this is what the average actual cost is.
Well, at least was in fiscal year 24, the last year we have sort of semi-final numbers for. It was clear they've not fully been audited and other stuff, and there's a couple
Right.
of caveats, but that's not a complicated line item, and so.
Should probably look at just a couple years back on that
Yep.
one to make sure we're okay. And then Board of Health stipends, as we discussed. Council on Aging, eliminating the van and the van drivers and instead adding $10,000 to expenses to help offset rides through MWRTA / potentially WRTA. As you may be aware, we do have a door-to-door transportation right now, grant funded through the end of June. And after that, it's going to be $2 per ride. That goes door to door anywhere in Berlin to Hudson. And to 3 locations in Marlboro, one of which is Apex. So you want to go bowling or axe throwing, that's a great place to go. But the microtransit grant that we have, it only lasts for 18 months and it goes to address those points east that we can't get to right now because we're in Worcester County, but our major metropolitan area is in Middlesex. So we also wanted to look at points west. How do people get to Worcester if we get rid of the van? So the idea was to have to put some of that extra money into the expenses and have a conversation with the 2 RTAs to see what we could do for transportation. Did I sum that up? All right.
Yep.
On line
Well-
143,
Yes.
you have COA / social services.
Oh,
We
thank
don't
you.
do
That
social
needs to come off.
services, and that salary, the 64 in change, that reflects how many hours? Because she's only scheduled for 24.
Right, that reflects a 40-hour salary because the personnel committee was amenable to potentially increasing the hours once the need was demonstrated.
Okay.
I do have documentation and data from her now that she's been here for almost 4 months, and our goal is to go back to personnel in the next month.
So that potentially could go down, Kristen? If the final, we land on hours that are less than 40.
Potentially, I believe, as does Melissa, as does the Council on Aging, that it is a 40-hour-a-week job. Personnel wanted to see data. And you know, so there was a bit of a discussion of let's get the new person in, let's start slow, let's ramp up and see where we go. So we had preserved that funding for now because that was still a little bit of an unknown since she's very new.
I just want to clarify in the, so the van driver, so you cut the 25,000, but put 10 of that into the expenses. So the total cut was 15,000.
Correct. And also you're gonna pick up some savings in the expense line item because you're not gonna be paying for maintenance on the van and gas. So once we figure out what that would save as well, that can be pushed towards the ride share through the RTAs.
What would be done with the van though? I mean, would you be looking at getting rid of the van or?
You'd make it a giant planter.
Well,
If possibly you're going to bring it back, the last thing we'd want to do is park it in a garage and then 2
Correct.
years later come back and find
No.
out just if you had driven it for, no.
I think it goes on
Would-
municipal bid. If it's really a service we get rid of, we could put it on municipal bid and we get whatever we get for it, like we do get rid of any sort of government property in town.
I know one other option that was discussed at the COA meeting was, could you use it for long distance trips? If you started being able to have trips again to like the casino or whatever that people have been talking about. So. Just an option, not saying that's how you.
Right. We don't have to decide that
Nope.
now. As a service, we're going to get rid of the service. We
Correct.
suggested getting rid of the service. That hasn't worked and hasn't existed for 9 months anyway.
That is correct. We cannot get van drivers. We lost our van driver over the summer. And we have recruited, we have interviewed, and we cannot get a van driver, not a
Right.
single one.
Right. Well, it's a low population that takes the van, so why are you going to sign up for a job on something that you may not work?
Correct. And typically the van, because the hours were limited, they were Tuesday, Thursday hours at that time, about 6 hours a day. The new transit grant is 6:45 a.m. to 6:45 p.m. Monday through Friday and 8 to 6 on Saturdays. So we've already had at least, it was somewhere between 9 and 11 individual riders book over 33 rides in the past month that it's been running. So that is seeing a far greater increase in usage than the van was.
And this grant goes through approximately
18 months. So if it started Feb 17, July of next year.
so just past the next fiscal year, yeah.
And WRTA, as you can already tell, is tracking ridership data, and they're going to run the costs, and they're going to basically tell us what it would cost to continue that service, and what it would take for the town to pony up and offset it, basically. All right, you did not vote on the cultural council still. That is still up in the air there.
I do have questions on, are there any of these things that you vote on that you're certain that there isn't an offsetting thing that, whether it's a grant or something like that, that we don't cut something, that seems like only $500, but it actually turns into $1,000 cut? Do we know for certain that any of these, are we certain that none of these things have, it's just not that amount, it's greater than that because we missed that there's some state.
Greater than how? Like,
Well,
I think making
like
some,
library is a perfect example of things, right? I mean, I know you're not dealing with that, but I don't know if there's certain things that, they got this amount of money as long as they matched a certain amount of money, right?
right, which is why I'm looking at, when I was proposing things, I was proposing things to eliminate entirely. So that might be that the town, the transfer station is a great example. The transfer station does have some revenue. And so cutting $100,000 out of the transfer station does reduce the revenue from the transfer station, but that revenue for transfer station was making that number only $100,000 and not something larger. And the reason I was looking again at eliminating entire things is that eliminating some of these then also eliminates the administration burden of tracking and monitoring those things. So like the transfer station is a high area where we happen to have liability calls. It is a high area for workers' compensation. It has a lot of.
Right. Well, you could get into that when you get to the transfer station, but I just want to make sure that there isn't something that's going to be a gotcha that we missed because we cut, like, say, $500 and found out that you really cut $1,500 from something, and at least be aware of it and not being an unknown.
In the library question I did get answered today because Victoria came by. That minimum appropriation requirement is also tied to the certification. It's not just to get the state
Yep.
funding.
Okay.
That was a good question because I did not know the answer to that. Now I do.
Mhm.
All right, let's see. So now we're down into intergovernmental, which obviously is the schools. Everything else stays the same. You haven't taken a formal vote on Berlin-Boylston at this time. You have on Assabet. And then you voted to reduce health insurance by $800,000. I'm sorry, by $100,000 to 800. I'd love to reduce it by that much. So what that represents is a little bit more than the extra spots that we reserve. But as Scott pointed out, we have had lower than anticipated spending in the past couple of years. I'm a little nervous only because we've had a lot of talk about people who are losing like spouse plans and coming on, but then we have some elected officials coming off. So I'm hopeful that it would balance out, but we would have to come to the reserve fund and or a fall town meeting if all of a sudden we see a surge in employees coming on the plan.
So what is that change? Before, I think it was always 2 full-time, 2 singles.
That gets rid of every extra space we have.
You don't have zero, you have 0 extra space.
Correct.
In fiscal year 24, the last year we have full numbers, we spent $555,000 in health insurance. And so, yes, it's gone up some, but again, a budget of 944 seemed high. We also reserved 2 families and 2 singles when the schools were part of our employee population. And right now our employee population is significantly smaller. And so the idea that we reserve so much over, and I look back at it, even in fiscal year 23 and 22, we're throwing that there's more than $100,000 to $200,000 has been over budgeted in that line item. And so I'm trying to get closer to real numbers, especially in a time period where, the schools look like a significant increase. And so I'm trying not to pass this along to the taxpayers.
Scott, you're going back and looking at budget and actuals and seeing where we can make changes. That's a useful exercise.
Yep. And so I got from June, again, pre-audited, there's a couple of places, but the list of, this is the wrong set, but I have the list of what for end of fiscal year 24.
Audited, don't show it to me.
Right.
Well-
It's not been audited.
Well, I would
But-
also,
But don't let me
no,
know.
it's not just the audit, though. It's
Right.
the caveat that we did have some departmental issues in the treasurer's office in 24. So we have
Right, but
finally
this-
reconciled, which is good.
But this is after, right? This is past
That
the end
is
of the reconciliation. I waited
post
because
reconciliation,
this is
yes.
post reconciliation at least.
I'm joking, but
Right.
it's a very useful exercise for
Yes.
informing us going forward.
Yep.
And we hope, they're educated guesses now, educated by the history.
And I had taken it down one spot already. The request that went in at 944 was 3 family and 3 single. And when I backed it down to 900,000, it backed it to 2 and 2.
Okay.
Wait a second.
the
944 to 900 was reducing a 1 and 1, but getting another 100,000. I guess, yeah, 44,000. All right.
It's a little bit more than the remaining 2 and 2.
Okay.
And that's it, I believe.
Well,
Although
we didn't
haven't
get to the
talked about
transfer
trans-
station.
Well, ultimately,
The-
as Scott
The,
pointed out, we voted
the
for.
select board, I was not on the winning end of that. And it's not something I'm willing to go to the mat for at the moment. I think it's something seriously to consider. Less than a quarter of the town uses the transfer station. And so, yes. And so it might be a majority of the people who follow on social media, but if you look at the number of households who buy stickers versus the number of households in town, it's not a large, it's one that most people are already doing something else in town. And so it's costing both money on that line item, but there's employees there that are represented in the Worcester retirement line and in the insurance line. That if you remove that, you reduce numbers in other places, including potentially ongoing maintenance and workers' comp. Do you have a breakdown of the number of using it that are single family homes versus like, I know if you took out every residence, right? I mean, you do have a Yeah, huge but the- number that aren't. The number of, I did the math, the numbers are escaping me, but the number of households in town versus the number of transfer station stickers we sell. But just overall households, not, because obviously, I mean, you're talking about River Bridge, you're talking about all these. We're not talking about, multifamilies are paying taxes. Yeah. Apartments are paying taxes, so just because you're in it, like when I lived in the Eco Village, we had our own trash hauling, but we still pay taxes that include the transfer station. Even though we don't get to use it, or didn't get to use it. I now live in a single family home, so I have a
Yeah.
transfer station sticker. And the stuff said online, if this went away, my household expenses are going up. I don't know why everyone in town is not using the transfer station, because driving private trash out of your home is significantly
Mhm.
more expensive than buying a transfer station sticker.
I did that math. I
Yep.
understand it, yes.
And we're hoping too that, the Board of Health will come back and look at the dump and transfer station. We'll look at it and maybe they will, as they presented to you guys months ago, to go for a pay for bag fee. Because think about it, if I'm only gonna now pay $100, making it up, make that clear, making it up, and it's $5 a bag, you can bet your Skippy that the glass comes out, the plastic comes out, the cardboard comes out, and I'm strolling around the dump, so I'm whizzing in one bag and not multiple bags. So I think that they need to look at options to present it back to the town, and honestly, to stop those people that pull up in a pickup truck and dump 35 bags, but claim that it's household and I can get rid of it. So I would like for them to, push back and also do some digging about how do you stop that?
So, yeah, just going back. So what's our, right now, the actual expense of the transfer station is that's what, 75,000
Mhm.
approximately?
And there's
And how
one
much is
employee that is benefits
benefited?
eligible.
Eligible? And how much is the other, from the fees and all that stuff, how much is, what percentage of this overall is of their total expense?
This is not offset anymore because we don't have an offset receipts account. They went to a
Revolving.
revolving fund in 25.
Right, so we don't, well,
We don't see any revenues there.
right, we don't see what the number is on this. Right, but Kristen, you had a dollar amount of how much is in that revenue, that
Oh,
account.
yes, sorry, is that what you're asking?
Well, yes, so kind of like how much are they taking on an annual basis from that account? versus what they're collecting in revenue.
So yeah, we only have, at that time I had half year data. I had it through December 31st. They took in 144,000, but they front load all their stickers in the first half of the year. So that ebbs and flows in, a little bit for the remaining 6 months based on what people are dropping off. So I think they will probably settle out at a little under 175 would be my.
So
rough
between
estimate.
2 and 3 to 1. So for every $1 that is spent, there's probably $2.50 that comes in revenue that covers their expenses.
So what is the expenses that they take out? I mean, we've done this we're in the second year of this, right?
Right, so they do use the revolving fund to offset their expenses. It doesn't come back to the town as a direct offset to the budget, but they only ask for 75,000 from the budget because they are able to use that revolving fund for most of their expenses.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious I'm trying to see if I can get a number is 75,000 represent 50% of their budget, 25% of their total
Probably less than a
budget?
third, between a quarter and a
I can
third.
pull up.
Between a
their
quarter
budget.
and a third?
Right, because they're
Okay.
spending about $150,000 to $175,000 out of the,
They're spending under.
well, again, assuming that most of the money that comes in goes back out and they're not building up a giant balance, which does not look like it's happening.
When they do their whole budget, I think they do it all and then they offset it at the bottom with transfer.
Another question I'd have is,
There you go.
I know it's all speculation, but are there other towns that don't have, I mean, where it's all private pickup, but also do not have a transfer station? I mean, for example, I lived in Hudson where
Boylston.
you had to do it privately, but they also had a transfer station.
Boylston does not do pickup and does not have a transfer station.
Boylston does not have either.
A friend of mine is on their waste management committee to try to figure out if they should actually start doing curbside pickup and what other options might be. That's sort of only reason I know that.
Just making sure that
Um,
math worked. So their total budget is $220,431, and they offset it with their revolving fund with $145,000.
Okay. So, yeah, the 75,000 is
Right.
just about exactly 1/3, just under, or just over actually.
And that revolving fund is the money that's collected for the stickers or additional disposal costs of like mattress and TV and that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
And potentially the money they get from recycling when that market
Mhm.
exists in good shape.
And one thing to keep in mind is on the items they take in, there's an extra cost to dispose of those
Mhm.
items. So that's part of the main reason we switched them to a revolving fund, because then whatever they take in, say someone brings 20 mattresses, well, they're not budgeted for that. So now they have the ability with a revolving fund to take in the money and pay out the money for someone to come pick up those mattresses. So that's part of why they advocated for it, and I think it makes sense. But that money carries over year as well. So whereas an offset receipts gets closed out to free cash, that revolving will stay year over year. So they may not need to ask for as much the following year, but this being the first year, we just don't know. We don't have the data.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions on that? Cliff, any questions? I want to make sure you're always there.
I appreciate that you're checking on me. I put my mute on in between. I'm fine. No questions.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So the other one we mentioned was recreation, which is about a $40,000 budget.
Again, no changes have been made at this time, but it was just discussed.
The one change that was made was $1,000 was reduced in the electricity budget and moved over to electricity, which we had talked about. Because after the FinCom meeting where we discussed it, Gene and I talked and that made more sense.
But that was
So
just, that 1,000
That's
was
just
just
moving
moved
one-
around. There's
yeah.
no changes in overall budget.
No.
Okay.
And this is another one where we'd like to see data. We know number of people that have taken the programs, but we don't know the revenue for the number of people. So you can say, hey, I only had 10 people, but if they're at 18 events, then those people could equal, $1,000. You don't know. So could some of that money then be used to offset wages, but that's just it. We don't have the information. So that's why I was uncomfortable just doing.
They
will.
Does 1870 activity fit under recreation? Where does that fit?
They're a revolving fund, aren't they?
Yeah, they're a revolving.
Sandra's pay.
Right, so like you're talking about the exercise classes or things like that
Hey,
that
just-
recreation puts on?
Activities at 1870, where does it fit anywhere on this budget?
No, 1870 has its own revolving.
So it's all done in a revolving fund. It's not, there's no,
But most
Town
of their
revenue.
expenses are paid for out of public facilities or public buildings. Basically, the revolving fund pays for the town 1870 town manager's salary and for some odd reason pest control.
I think pest control, because they were trying to find a bill that they could pay in its entirety, and oil became one of those that it couldn't really pay in its entirety anymore.
That makes that
Or
using a
ever.
revolving fund.
Right,
Mhm.
right. It's like the transfer station, that they bring in money, it goes into that fund and they pull out of it.
But on the data point, now that they are getting the MyRec software that they came to us for last year, we're still trying to get that up and running. Once it's up and running, everything will be booked through there. So you will have the
Mhm.
data about who's attending, how much money you're bringing in, what the cost of the programming is versus, payroll.
Right.
So are there transfers, even between departments, say? Like the 1870 obviously charges a fee for usage of the building.
Yep.
If recreation is running a program there, if the library is running a program there.
No,
do
'cause
they
we don't
pay a
charge
fee
We don't
for it?
charge for town.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd be like kind of charging ourselves.
Okay.
Mm.
So it would really just be a wash.
Okay.
I think the only other one I missed was tax title. The board had reduced it down to 7,500 from the budget of 10,000. We have had not a lot of tax title activity, but no, it is going to be ramping up in all honesty. That's something that takes the back burner when you're dealing with everything else going on. And I know that the treasurer collector, that is one of her priorities for getting into in the latter half of 25 and 26, as we've finally closed out everything with regard to 24. So didn't want to cut that entirely.
Okay, well, I've been in this situation before. I was on the finance committee back in 2008, 2009. And of course, I also know what the next consequences of all these things were, because which was definitely fine to try and preserve as much things as possible. We never actually got to the point of eliminating any type of things. But I know one of the consequences in the long term was obviously it impacted free cash. So the future capital becomes a challenge. We would be pushing that type of stuff down the road.
And the one thing to remember, the general rule of thumb is it is much harder to get something back than it is to keep it, in all honesty, because then you're adding to the budget. So you have to find new revenue for it. So you're at 178,264 in select board cuts. Keeping recreation in the transfer station.
Okay, so after doing all of that, after those cuts, so the town budget overall has a decrease of 178,264. Did I read that correct?
No, if you take the first column, the town increase was 361. And if you take out 250, you're down to about a town increase of about 110,000.
Okay, so the town increase with that is about 110,000. Okay, the 178,264 is the
That's the wrong
additional
direction.
Yeah,
decrease.
I did. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
So 109,971 would be the town increase now with the recommended select board cuts. And that does already take into account the cuts that I recommended. Just ignore this because now this is wrong.
Right.
I was wanting to double check and the BBRSD debt, it was 91. I thought at one point it was showing only at 73,000. So it was just
It changed.
changed again.
It did change between the version 2 of the budget and the final presentation.
Okay, I was trying to
Yep.
sort through that type of stuff. I just wanted
And
to
I
check.
am not entirely sure if it just wasn't captured properly, if it was just a typo. But that is the number that was voted on by the school committee. Is the 558,883.
Okay. I just wanted to double check on that one because I know that had gone up.
Right. And to make it clear too, just, for the viewing public, it's not actually going up $90,000. It's, as we discussed
Well-
before, we weren't charged. It is in terms of what we're paying, but we were not charged for 2 interest payments in FY25 or FY24.
Okay, yeah, looking at the last, right. I mean, it's going up, right, because the 2018 bond was not being assessed to us at all. And that's assessed, well, between the February 12th presentation and the recent one, it went from 94,362 to 97,442, so just over 3,000 increase there. And the 2021 refinance, which I'm surprised that would have changed, but 439,108 to 453,440. Thought we had they provided us, actually a separate email, the payments.
debt
Yeah, the
schedules.
debt schedule. So maybe it was just a,
They do,
Addition
but
may-
they
there?
have to give us our portion or our
oh,
proportion of
okay,
it.
right.
So-
This is the,
The
right,
schedules are helpful, but
right, the
not.
proportions may have been
It's all
incorrectly
total debt, right?
calculated.
yes.
Yeah.
And there's 2
So,
bonds.
yeah.
There's a 2018 bond and then they refied and there's a 2021 bond.
And I don't think, they didn't set it like Assabet did set it at the beginning, so it changes every year.
It goes up every year too.
Mhm.
It fluctuates.
Well, it actually fluctuates. If you look at it, it's pretty steady.
They didn't do it the way Dennis would have wanted to do.
No.
I do remember hearing that. Yes.
Okay.
Where do you want to go from here?
Well, let's scroll. Well, first of all, anybody have anything else they wanted to look at in the top section? Let's just go down, and look at what the numbers are before we go into any votes. So with,
Just on that debt, that 90,000 increase is really because of the gap from the last couple of years, right?
That's what I was trying to explain, but probably
Yes.
didn't do a very good job.
Okay,
Yes.
just wanted to be clear on that's what we're looking at with the 90,000, because otherwise it should be pretty much flat.
It should
Yes.
not be 90,000. It's still, this year was a couple $1,000 increase, I believe, over last year. But it was almost the same. That 90,000 is because we didn't get fully charged in 24 or 25.
Yes, and those few dollars increase maybe because we didn't pay the interest and we're late on some interest. Would that affect the?
I don't know, 'cause
Schedule of
the
payments?
debt schedules go all the way back to the beginning and those don't typically shift, so.
Okay,
yes, there will be whatever kind of penalties that they may have had to pay if they were.
That
late.
that shouldn't affect the overall
No,
debt
it won't,
schedule though, once
won't
that's
affect
set,
the debt schedule. But
right?
yeah, the missing bond, they were assessed at 97,442. So if we didn't have that, if that missing bond was still missing, you'd basically, it would have been, well, because of the sharing, you can't really tell what the dollar amount was.
Yeah.
But basically, it would have gone down by about 7,000 for us, our share. Okay, so looking at those bottom numbers, so the town increase, we said 109,971. The Assabet increase is set because they're already at their state mandated minimum level contribution, so they can't go lower.
Correct.
The operating budget we got is 579,992. The debt, again, the operating increase of BMS and our assessment of Tohoto. And then the debt increase is 90,948. And we aren't even talking capital at this time. So we have a total increase there would be 935,876. New revenue, using, well, right, if you use the 5% increase on the levy, which would be, which would actually offset that because you'd have 1,031,000. So what if you do the 4.5%? I just want to see where our high end is in,
The 4.5, you said?
yeah.
You're on 5.
Okay, so it's,
You're still short.
yeah, you'd be short by,
Right, but if the schools come back at a $500,000 number for their operating, which cuts $70,000 off their operating piece, you're pretty dead on. Dead
That's
on to
a
a 4.5% increase, which is still a big increase, but
right, if they were a $70,000 decrease, can you just, so basically, yeah, you were pretty much dead on. It would be a 4.5%
That was-
levy increase.
So
I
then
believe
that's
that-
going to have,
And Tohoto Capital, the Boylston number, operating. That's what I was
but
told.
Boylston
by-
asking for 500,000 was for both, yes. I have not said that number,
Yeah,
so,
I know.
I did.
because they're 484 just for elementary school, just for operating of elementary school in Tohoto. And so when you add their debt increase on top of that and they're well over their $500,000 number they asked for.
Well, that budget will be adjusted for that number.
Right.
Mhm.
And so one of the things when I was on FinCom is that on school stuff, it could rely on Boylston to force cuts that got our numbers down to where we needed them to be. And if my math is right, if Boylston's trying to get to a $500,000, including operating and debt, not capital, the cuts they have to make, assuming they don't make entirely out of Boylston Elementary School, they'll have to do something at Tohoto and something out of Tohoto, that should get us that should get us closer.
So I had a conversation March 11 with Boylston FinCom, and that's what I was told,
Mhm.
that 500 includes
Right,
those three things.
right.
The only excluded is BES Capital, which.
Right.
So that number is still lower than what we're looking at our assessment because. Your ask tonight was just for the operating piece of it,
Right.
but not the operating plus
Right.
debt.
My ask was definitely more generous than your ask, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You're very kind. Kinder than
Broke my FY 25.
Well, still
Well,
better than
for the schools,
negotiations.
I was definitely harsher on the town budget.
I know.
But it was to prove a point as well.
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably
She's
just as well with
soft-spoken.
what I've been saying. Yeah, I forget. I can project if you want me to.
Cliff may want to hear what you have to say.
Cliff's
I
like,
don't
no,
think so.
he's not even coming. Oh, there he is. He's off mute.
Well, I put myself off on mute in case I swear or say something that I don't want to.
In case you start to snore.
No, I'm not snoring.
Okay, so right now, I mean, if there was not any other cuts as is, you're looking, well, the levy increase would be just over 4.5%. What was it, 55,000? Every 0.5 is how much?
75
75,000.
levy.
So it'd be
Yeah, you're like 4.7 or 4.8 right now,
yeah,
assuming the schools make no cuts, and I really hope they make some cuts in operations. They're obviously not going to make cuts in debt because debt's debt.
And they
That's
can
off
make,
the,
I
and
know.
they can make some in capital too.
Right, but there's no capital in this budget.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
That's right.
I keep forgetting that sometimes.
Yeah.
But I've caught myself several times about to say something and then like, oh, but capital's not in that number.
yeah. And one thing we do Compared to Boylston, at least the elementary school, we have a much uglier future capital needs that they're identifying.
I was gonna show you the overall, but I somehow broke my budget. I deleted something in FY 25, so now it's thrown everything off.
What's everything off here?
Oh, just in 25.
Oh, you're.
I
at
broke
25.
my 25, my 25 expenditure budget when we were playing around with something, so
Okay.
I can't show you what the actual amount is because now it's got my excess levy and that is not a correct number. So
The problem with doing live numbers
Mhm.
is that sometimes something can go awry.
this is true.
What's the age difference in the buildings, Berlin Memorial compared to Boylston Elementary?
Ours is a
BES is
lot
older.
newer. BMS was like, what, 99?
1994.
Yeah, we're
I
about
think.
So
25
about
years old.
30 years.
Okay.
25, 30, yeah.
It's a much newer building.
Yep.
I know what I did. I took out BMS Capital. That's what I did.
You have the original saved
I
somewhere,
do.
correct?
Uh,
Okay.
oh, yes.
This is just
Yes.
for show.
Well,
Okay.
play around at FinCom.
It's gonna
but-
drive,
Yes.
yeah, I was just gonna say, if you give me 1 second, I can pull up the PDF of it and I can just fix it real quick and then I
You'll
can give
feel
you
better?
real numbers and mostly just because I'll feel better. So I appreciate that. Yep, because what I did was I took out the 143, 132. And then what was the other capital number on here? It was 38,253.
Oops, wrong one.
No, thank
Yep,
you.
Undo.
Please tell me that totals mine. Yes, okay. Now
Feel
it's
better?
okay. I do, thank you.
Okay. Save
Appreciate it.
often. Hmm.
Oh, I save ridiculously. Okay, now, so now. Now this is right. So that was our excess levy for 25. So I have to point, now this is what I have to do. I have to go back and delete this. And I have to put in your new budget. Which is this one. There we go. So now you're using 349,261 in excess levy, plus the increase in the debt exclusion. So that brings you over. Nope, that's still wrong. I gotta fix that.
But again, levy capacity numbers the average taxpayer doesn't care about that
Mhm.
number
Very
because
true.
the amount of taxes they pay is the amount of taxes we assess, and whether it's over or under the limit.
Correct. At the end of the day, they want to know how much their
Right.
taxes are going up, so
Right.
they can figure out where to find the money in their budget.
Well, I think, Scott, the one thing that people understand is if there's an override vote, they understand that.
Right, at a certain point, we would need an override vote. But we cross that bridge when we get there in $1 more million or so. I mean, I used to advocate pretty regularly that we needed to have an underride, so exactly the scenario we're in couldn't happen, but
Kind of like the
it's too late
alphabet
now.
school, right at the minimum local contribution, so that when you bump it, you notice.
Mhm.
And Assabet is still based on the number of students. And so I remember it being, 9 and 12 and 13 people and us yelling at Nadine about how you need to do better recruiting in Berlin. And now it's gone from 37 to 44 from next fiscal year. So we actually have a good number of students going there because it's now, I mean, do we know how many students we have at Tohoto? Isn't it like
Yes.
two?
There was a
About at
handout,
one point, yeah.
March 11, and Tohoto is 532 students. Berlin Memorial is 247.
Right, but of
Boylston-
Tohoto, how many are Berlin versus Boylston?
Well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Berlin Memorial is 247, up from 220 last year.
Yeah, I was just
Up
gonna
from
say.
220, and Boylston is 330. So it's really, we are 2/3 of Boylston going into Tohoto.
Right.
And then you're taking roughly 40 students going to Assabet, so that's, what is that? It's 1/6 are going to Assabet of ours.
Yeah.
and 0 from Tohoto, from Boylston.
Right, because they're not part of the collaborative.
So our ratio gets closer, rather than 2/3, it gets closer to.
1/3 when more people start going, right, right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think both towns send, a number of the students go to St. John's or some other private school, right? So there's, I don't know that that's different between the two towns.
And it's always been that way, even
Yep.
from the archaic
Yeah.
days when I was in high school. Berlin kids went Assabet,
Mm.
Boylston kids went St. John's, Notre Dame, and whatever tech schools in Worcester.
Well, you have Berlin students going to those private schools too as well.
Clayview.
Quite a
But
few,
as those students leave Tohoto, do we get school choice kids that come in? Do they just leave those spaces empty or do they
So-
open them up?
So Heidi, we're gonna have to go back and look at school committee recordings or minutes, because there was a vote taken within the last 6 months where the school committee didn't want school choice seats.
Right, because
was a
they're already
dialogue
bursting at
about
the
it.
seams of the number of students just taking Berlin Boylston, so they don't have the room. So like if those Aspet kids started coming back,
Well,
the
I'm
Tohoto would
gonna
burst at the seams.
disagree, because we saw classroom breakdowns the last 2 years in the budget presentations, and our classrooms at, certainly at Berlin Memorial, are not full, not anywhere
Right,
near.
it's referring to, sorry, Tohoto.
Tohoto, I don't know. I
Right.
don't know what the class numbers are at Tohoto.
Getting into the details of
Right.
the
Did we give you
schools
enough
now.
time to fix your budget?
Oh, it's been fixed.
Oh,
yes,
okay, all
thank you.
right.
Can we do the other number just for me at least? The last time we discussed was 3.5%. What's the deficit right now at 3.5%?
At 3.5, you mean at the,
Yeah, if the levy went up 3.5%, doing the 529,081 number.
At what, 75%, 75,000 per half percent?
you want to, okay, so I'm putting 3.5 in, okay.
1% more would be 150,000 more, so it'd be near 200,000.
You frighten me.
You guys
That
are
you do this in your head.
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the spreadsheet person.
I know
I'm
you are the
just not-
spreadsheet
My brain
person.
doesn't do that.
Don't expect us to follow you, just so you know. We,
Why is that?
Well, no, he's over there rattling numbers off,
Columns.
and I'm pulling up spreadsheets and doing the math, and he just
There we
leans over. He's like, yeah, we got the same number. So
I understand.
I take long math.
There's your
Mhm.
deficit at 3.5.
The 3.5 where we
206.
talked about at our meeting 2 weeks ago, at least at the schools trying to help us hit that number. We're at 207,000 short.
I'm sorry, what are we at? What rate are we at?
At 3.5%, what we
3.5.
talked about 2 weeks ago.
Yes,
Was it actually 2 weeks ago or was it 3 weeks ago?
2 weeks.
Yeah,
2
2 weeks ago.
In this last.
Yeah. So. All right, before we even try and go into the others, so we're, just go through people's, thoughts and opinions on, what. We already know Scott's, opinion of, the operating, fortunately, we got the operating and where's the operating number?
You're looking for the summary sheet, this one?
Yeah, though the operating increase is what? Over, 570,992.
Yep.
Of them getting in your, basically cutting 71,000 to get down to the 500,000 numbers. Am I correct on that?
The
Yeah.
500, yeah, but again, I was just, wondering, you guys don't have a vote or an opinion,
Yeah.
have a vote yet on what your number would be.
So. Where are you, start with you, Mary?
What's on the table? Scott, I'm not
Yes.
following. What's on the table?
Well, right now, this is what the number would be at 3.5%, right?
So what number are
And-
what are we talking about?
Well, you can, at 3.5%, the deficit is still 207,000, 206 and 795. No, Scott Hawkins had made the proposal of them requesting schools to get at least down to 500,000 operating, which would reduce theirs by 71,000. Reduction of 71,000, you're still at was it 135,000 thousand
Mhm.
or 136,000.
Scott, let me take it
Deficit.
the other way. I,
Hmm?
I don't want us to go any higher than 3.5 on a tax. I really want to drive it down. When I look at the net school spending, I'm telling you, and we don't know what it costs to run that school. So I don't want to hit our taxpayers again like we did. And we have the actual percents that Kristen was able to supply. Fiscal year 25 taxes, 7.49%, fiscal year over the previous year, and for fiscal 24, 6.88% over the previous year. And then in fiscal 20, in fiscal 23, it was 1.95%. And I tell
That's
you,
huge.
those numbers are huge, and those numbers were driven by school budgets into which we had no transparency. We had no idea what was going on with those budgets. And the increases were quite high, and there was a lot of sound and fury around it, but I don't think we know. Again, I'm going to say it again because it's troubling me that we don't actually know what it costs to run those 3 schools. And so I simply don't, I really want to push hard on this and not, not go, I'm looking at that 206,000, 207,000 deficit on trying to close the revenues and expenses in our town budget. And I just don't want to hit the residential tax base payers. I don't want to do this to them again.
Can I ask Mary a question?
Yeah,
That's what that would bring their operating budget down to.
Scott?
Operating.
Scott, can I ask Mary a question?
Yeah, yes. Go
Okay.
ahead, Cliff.
So Mary, if we were to agree to maintaining that 3.5% number, what would you do about capital?
I'm looking at capital entirely separately, Cliff, because different considerations apply. Department of Revenue has targets for what we should have in free cash. We're settling in on a free cash number. We know what the town needs to do on capital projects. We have a capital plan. When the regional school district gets its capital plan together, we're going to be able to deal with that in a much more orderly fashion. But right now, I think that the capital ask in this March 11 vote is not realistic. And even the parts that are grayed out, well, of course, but the ones remaining after you gray out. Let's see, what was that? What did we decide that total was? It was
Like
plus one.
437.
So it's about 300,000, right? Or
300,000 for Berlin Memorial, about 137 for Tohoto, which
Yeah.
counts at 1/3. So I thought it was about 437 or so.
Yeah, which means the town is going to have to compromise something that we would like to be doing around capital. And I can't support it because, a year from now, with the team in place in the school district, I think I'd be much more supportive. It's where we're sitting now, and it's the data, the financial data they have available to them is,
I don't think I understand what your answer about capital is. I'm sorry. Maybe
on
I'm
the
being.
capital.
Yeah.
No. It's okay.
So they narrowed it down to 3. They have them prioritized there. Are you
Yes.
saying you wouldn't support any of those? All of those?
No.
None of those?
No.
What are you saying?
No, what I'm saying is, the capital consideration is very separate from the operating consideration.
No, I
Okay.
understand that, but it's not separate when you get down to the bottom numbers. So
Right.
So
There's a difference, Cliff,
how
when
we
you're
fund it.
funding it out of free cash versus funding it out
I
of
know
next
that.
year's tax bills, right?
I
So,
know.
so the free cash is what we've been accumulating for when we need to do big things. So it's meant for the capital, and we put in place 5 years ago guidelines for what to do with our free cash. The Department of Revenue tells us that your free cash ought to be running somewhere I think it was around 4 or 5% of your total budget, and we're okay on that.
Okay,
I think in the pandemic, we got very nervous during the pandemic, and so we weren't spending it, and so it
Mhm.
got a little bit high. But it's come down, and yes, say the safety things here, replace the elevator controls, fine. The next two items I see as more flexible, and if you can stage it, do it in a staged way.
okay,
And
that's,
Capital is meeting tomorrow night. If
Yeah.
anybody wants to.
Okay.
Right,
That's
yeah,
gonna-
actually, Cliff, I should punt this over to Capital, but the Capital Planning Committee, but
But my concern is too, is that if school stands up and says, no, you know, here's our budget, all these grayed out ones still come into play. So I would almost love for them to say 1, 2, 3 on Berlin Memorial and 1, 2, 3, 4 on Tohoto and not add in the grade ones because they voted this as a whole number. They didn't say whatever this adds up to. They said it's 1.3 for BMS and it's 987 roundup for Tohoto.
well, the way I view
They
that,
voted these solid numbers.
Yeah, they
Correct.
voted them. I
Yep.
think what's clear is from the discussion is they know it's not gonna be that number. And that's why they've now broken out, the top 4, top 3 items. Just going to your comment, Mary, I think one of the things you're looking at is the device replacement they'd already discussed that with us. They were looking, I mean, that's pretty much almost a continuing expense. It already is kind of broken out. It's not we're doing it this year, next year, and you're not going to see any device replacements on there. You're going to be looking at some of that same
I-
numbers rolling.
yeah,
through.
I understand. I understand that point.
Yeah. That's the one and that's why they talked about whether it should really be, part of being the operating budget, because it just becomes similar number rolled over every single year.
Well, sure, and as the district has said, that we want to look at that, but that's a year down the road to look at that, whether it's in operating or capital, or how to do the transition, because I think there's generally a sense that it belongs in operating, but without the data, without having, every time I ever built a budget, you always look back and you look forward and project, and you can't look back. You have to go back 3 years, and it was a very different world 3 years ago in many ways. So it's not, those numbers are not as helpful as I'd like.
if the school district puts the devices back in the operating budget, which is, I believe, where it should be, that's an automatic increase in the operating budget next year.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I understood that, but we're gonna get a little break on the debt next year, Cliff, because we're not gonna be paying 2 years at once. So that would kind of fit in nicely, wouldn't it? If we can manage that.
Get a
And-
break in the
and-
debt, not paying.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, we're not paying an extra
no.
year.
The
We got
increase would
a
be-
$90,000 increase because there were 2 debt assessments so we were catching up. We're playing catch up this year on the debt.
Dex, can you bring up that email you sent of the debt schedule on the 2 bonds?
So Cliff.
I don't think I'm sorry, I don't think that's true. I think that's what the debt is.
Yes, that's what the debt is. This is not a one-time.
not a
thing.
I
makeup.
thought it was an increase. I thought it was the
Oh,
increase.
it's a one-time increase
The
is what you're
one-time
saying,
increase
right?
is what I'm talking about. The 90,000 one-time increase is what I'm.
Next year will be higher. It just won't be higher by 90,000. It'll only be higher by a couple thousand.
Exactly, exactly. And that gives both towns a place for them to insert the devices into the operating budget if they choose to do that. It's not, actually, I shouldn't even be talking about it. But I think in terms of the Berlin, the BMS capital, Cliff, I'd say the elevator controls and the device replacements, to me, would be the priorities, the cameras being less so.
Kristen,
They get, but
can
they
you
get
clarify,
instances.
can you clarify about the debt?
Yeah, we're going through right now. Can you see what?
No, I
Not
haven't
yet.
shared it yet.
Okay,
Hold on.
she's getting
I'm
ready to
just, I'm
share.
saving it.
Kristen, the number I'm talking to is in your budget. When you, it's the line in the budget for.
Yes, it's a $90,000 increase from
Exactly.
FY 25 to FY 26 because of those missed payments and, or the not assessed payments in FY
Cliff-
25.
Cliff, can you see what Kristen's
No.
got on her?
Hold
screen?
on.
Can't
Yeah.
see it.
No, I can't.
Hang
All
on.
I
right,
need a
sorry.
tech person.
I'm looking at a blank screen.
It's coming.
You getting anything?
There you go.
yet? Did it come through for you?
Yeah, I'm looking up behind you
okay,
so I can
okay.
see I can see Cliff and I can see the
So it's
worksheet.
line 189, row 189, Tohoto debt repayment.
459 to 550.
Okay, it's labeled a repayment. Got it.
Yes, and that increase, that dollar change is so large because we're playing catch up for the 2 years when the assessment wasn't given to the town. So that
we-
number's not gonna be
Do
nearly
we
the
know what the
same.
assessment would be had it been not a repayment?
Well, no, I wouldn't say we're playing catch up. They're not charging us for the missed payments in 24 and 25. This is just the difference between what they assessed us in 24 and what the actual payments are in 25.
Now, that's what
Sorry,
I
but they-
understood.
Right, so this should be pretty, next year, that number will be approximately the same, we just won't have that increase.
Right.
Okay.
But I think
was
that's what
trying to
Mary's
say.
saying. She's saying you're not gonna have a $90,000 increase next year.
Yeah, I think the confusion
Yeah,
is
and
when
this
you were
is an
saying,
immovable thing. This is
well, you
something
were
we
saying
have to
that
do.
the catch up, there's no catch up. I think that's the confusing part is the terminology you were using
All right,
versus what your point was.
but you get when you see the dollars, that's the thing I'm talking about. It's not gonna be that change won't be so large next year. It's predictable. It's on the debt repayment schedule and they sent it to us, and so it's predictable. And it won't be that much.
Yes, it'll be around 550 again next year. Does
Mhm.
that clear it up?
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And I do understand, Cliff, that the schools get to spend the money as they see fit, and we just have to figure out what it is that we can afford to do.
When's capital planning meeting?
Tomorrow.
They're being tomorrow, so we'll have more clarity on the capital planning side. Do we want to put input to the capital planning before that or get their analysis afterwards?
Is capital planning getting the same information that we are as far as how they prioritize these things for BMS and for Toronto?
I don't know what has been given to them, but my goal was to forward to them, which I already have, but I'm gonna actually print it out, is this where it shows the prioritization. So it might be helpful if someone from FinCom is available to go.
But we have no say over the projects.
That
And
is
so I
correct.
think it is like, if we gave Berlin Memorial School $298,000, here's the things we are looking at doing. But we could decide, we don't have to say like only number one or only number two. We could say the number we're going to give you is 250, and you can decide which of those 3 projects you can do. And maybe they find a way to do all 3 of them within 250, or maybe they can only do one of them, or maybe they can do 6 things in that list.
Yeah.
And so I mean, for me, it is the reason I can come up with numbers faster is that I'm not trying to decide which one of those projects I think they should do and not do. I think is like, what do I think the town can afford?
Yeah, and I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to answer Cliff's question, and
Yep.
I don't think maybe I didn't get to the right question.
Yeah, and I think that explanation is helpful. Especially with the request from Toronto. You know, because like with that school furniture,
Right.
I mean, that's the number that I kind of look at and I'm kind of like, huh. But if we decide, okay, well, towards the Tohoto capital budget, we're giving you X amount of money.
Do it.
Whether they want to do it all on the school furniture or they want to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Well, that's just it. We have no control. We just say, here's a check for $100.
Mhm.
Go figure it out. You know, we can't say 10, 35, 18. We have no control over that. We vote a number. And the school does what they want.
Okay, so this is using the $1.2
2.
million free cash number.
Yep.
Which would leave, as you said, going by the capital plan, 360,000. Of course, if you went by what the town has, is putting in requests in the schools and all that such, I think they total 740, essentially 747,000 combined, using the Tohoto top 4 and the BMS top 3. And after that, you're looking at what, 65,000, we're targeting for special articles?
Yep, the only one that's unknown is the prior year bills. I just plugged in 5,000. I don't think it's gonna be that much, but I just plugged that in as placeholder.
What's our spend rate on special articles the last couple of years? Have we been hitting that 180,000 or been well below
It's
that?
been under it, except last year, it was a little higher because we had to fund the revow that was a $55,000 article in and of itself. But we've been lower,
Okay,
like this is only 65. So then if you put in the town capital request, you put in 0 for stabilization as the board proposed, 50 for OPEB, and you don't fund capital stabilization. Then that leaves you with 773, 915. That you can decide what you'd want to do with.
okay, that would be used, so you'd,
Oh, minus the 300, I'm sorry. You gotta have the $300,000 in there.
So for
So you have to
73,
subtract that out.
And that proposed rollover is about what DOR recommends, a little close to it.
No, 300,000 would be the rollover.
Hmm. That's low.
Right.
This is 25%.
Hmm.
the bottom line, there's not enough money in capital to fund everything.
Right.
Actually, they're dangerously close, but you would cut things way too tight.
Yep.
So in other words, if you told Berlin Boyle, if you told the school district that, you give, let's say, it's like 275 for Berlin Memorial School and 75 for Tohoto, that's about 350. You still then have $100,000 you've not touched that you could potentially use at, fall town meeting for things that we don't know about yet.
Well, and just for the sake of argument, capital may not recommend all
Oh, good.
311,000 on the
Right.
town side.
what are the town side items?
A mower for the cemetery for 16,500. Asbestos study at the library, sidewalk and parking at the library, retaining wall repairs and door replacement. I know that door replacement is their #1 choice. It's a problem.
And the sidewalk, retaining wall and door replacement, those all came up in the building assessments that were done, so they just
Yes.
aren't like randomly picking
Right.
the most expensive items. Those were ones that stuck out, and I bet if you went back into the ADA study, I can guarantee that sidewalk
It's in there.
was way
There's
high.
pictures of it.
So there's backup, like legit backup for all those items.
For the specifically library?
For library
Yeah.
and for the
library,
municipal building sidewalk repairs.
Yeah.
That dip between the curb and the sidewalk is hazardous. They basically said that was our #1 thing we needed to replace at the municipal offices, which is why Fred put that in there. Then there's an F450 replacement. One of the bay doors, he's spaced it out over 3 years for the 3 doors. A mower vac system replacement and seal coating at the highway garage.
And is the F450 replacement, is that under, it's like the regular schedule that we're planning, or anything get bumped out from private years and we're extending the life, or?
Highway has really old stuff, and to be honest, they're not really on a regular replacement schedule. PD we do with the cruisers because of the use they get, but highway sort of gets whatever we have, unfortunately. I'd love to get it on a regular replacement schedule, but
And so therefore, it's on here because
it's
of-
replacing something very old is my understanding. I don't know the year of it, but I can get that for you. Yeah, it's on there because of dire need, not just
Mhm.
because of an annual replacement schedule.
Okay. And that's it,
That's it, plus the cemetery mower down
Right,
here. And so
cemetery
that gets
mower.
you to the 311,085. Because the other ones are mitigation funds.
And then going back to the free cash numbers, so we got the 360 that's available, and then there's always the possibility of tapping into extra special, some for the special articles and the general stabilization.
So I'm high estimating 65,000 for the special articles. I put in the full amount for capital, nothing for stabilization and capital or general, and 50 for OPEB, plus the 300 that we need to carry over and not touch. So that leaves you 473,915. To decide what you want to do with it.
473, 915 for capital.
If you wanted to use all of that.
Or, let me see here, so you're, oh, wait a second, right? Oh, general stabilization, you're looking to still do 120,000, not.
Mm-mm.
No.
No.
We
not
are-
anything.
Column B is what is being proposed. Column A
Oh.
is the targets you should be trying to hit.
Yes, sorry, this is I should scroll back up to the top. This is the plan itself, so this is the proposed, and this is the target, yeah, that helps.
Or we count, so the, it's not
So
B,
look-
it's actually C. Okay,
Lines, rows 15 through 18 are follow the guidelines, yeah.
Right, right.
And should
Oh,
be-
I should
there
say,
be
yeah,
5 in
guidelines.
there. What's the 5th one?
Oh, well, there's 3 for 10%. I just only factored out 10% once.
Right.
Ah, okay.
okay, so there's, okay.
That's just helping me do the math. Those are just the formula outside of the box. Those are just, you can ignore those. Those are just the formulas helping me do the math.
Okay, so that's, okay, so it's 473, 915 is leaving. What would be available or possibly a maximum available for outside of the town's capital needs, the town's special articles. You could go as high as 473, 915. Which, well, the only other capital is the schools.
Right.
Correct. But you
Yeah.
couldn't go any higher. You really couldn't go any higher than that. The only way you could get more capital for the schools is if there was less capital allocated to the
Right.
town.
Well, or
And-
pull from one of the stabilization
Or
funds.
pull
Right.
from
Well,
OPEB, because right
well,
now the other
right
two.
now-
No. You could pull
Pull
from,
out of
pull out of
stabilization.
another
Yes.
stabilization fund instead of using free cash.
Right, and right
But-
now, if you use the top 3 and top 4 on the schools, that number is only four, around
436.
Yeah,
Oh,
436, yeah.
so you actually would have a number that you could go as high, you could actually cover those
Right.
and have
Mhm.
30 something, another 37 left over there.
Right.
Assuming, again, that the town sticks with the, no, that they get the recommendation that's full 311 and,
Right, but it's also assuming that that free cash comes in at the 1.2, which is a slightly conservative number. I mean, it's not going to be 1.5 or 2 or anything wild like that,
It
you know.
could be larger. It's not going to be less than one.
I'm gonna assume that 1.25.
But this does-
Is a pretty conservative.
It does
number.
mean that we could fund all of the town's capital requests and all of the school requests and still do that by sacrificing what goes into general stabilization and capital stabilization, pull them all off. I still think we want a lower number, but we could do that number.
That's correct. That means you'd be rolling over $337,893 in free cash to FY 27.
7.
And don't forget, we've squeezed everything out of the budget. So that means I would estimate your free cash is going to be under $500,000 next year.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing that at least, well, we've squeezed a lot of
Roughly.
things out. I mean, well, how much did you squeeze out, though? I mean,
We squeezed out everything out of the budget.
yeah, I mean.
I mean,
what was
all the
total
expenses
numbers?
are-
I mean, you squeezed out 178,000 plus what was it? before that?
70, I took out of all the expense line items, everything I could, and that came out to 70,
71, 72.
73, something.
And plus all the supplemental requests were killed.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about supplemental funding
No.
requests, which by the way is going, just want to mention the library. They are going to have to reduce hours if the supplemental funding is not approved because they do not have sufficient staff to fund both floors of the library at 33 hours a week. So they're looking at going closer to the minimum of 20.
I mean, we will offset some of that. We do have that 116 that's sitting there unless we spend it. That was what the towns, from, that was put in from the extra mitigation so we could handle the agreement from last year with the schools. So will be extra free cash that we're expecting to come through.
So if you do the cuts I recommended, plus the cuts that their cuts also took my cuts into account, but that's $251,000 that we've scaled the town budget back from what was requested.
That's enough.
I think it's a little too much, to be honest.
I
but-
do too. I do too.
Me too.
Mhm. Berlin's already razor thin. Scott, you've said it multiple times. There's like no,
Right. To cut, you have to do less. There's
Correct.
not in existing line items.
correct.
There's not fluff. There's no
No.
waste, fraud, or abuse in town. And you might be able to quibble on a $50 bill here and there. That same person who you could quibble probably found $50 that none of us would have found somewhere else. So, I mean, I think and there's not like, again, postings online, there's not a lot of employees.
No,
I mean, once you remove, again, police and fire.
and Highway.
and-
You have one, maybe two employees per office.
Right, and so the total is less than 20 people when you remove that, and so it's not like there's hundreds of people in town that you can, cut. And none of them are highly, we stay near the median in pay in all the positions. The studies continue to show that. We'll do another study this next year. We'll probably come out the same thing, that we've now dropped below median
Wow.
pay.
Mhm.
And so there's just not, there's not a lot out there. If you're going to cut further, you have to get rid of something that really makes Berlin, Berlin. I mean, some of the fun stuff we do, some of the neat stuff that adds culture to the town, and even that's not a ton of money.
Mm-mm.
And even the 73,166 that I recommended will result in more of the reserve fund needing to be used because we've cut those expense line items so close that inevitably a couple of them are going to go over.
Well, are we being penny wise, pound foolish? I mean, we
I
have
had
to
one
look,
resident contact me and say they were concerned about that.
and I think we all have. I think we've all been reached out that we're cutting this way too thin to sacrifice for the school.
I mean, I think it's a very important exercise to go through for sure, because we're asking them to sharpen their pencils. We've sharpened our pencils, but at what point are we going to be in
Correct,
upside down
correct,
is my concern.
correct.
One of the things to keep in mind is in the public safety sector that Berlin, for its size and population, has higher than normal needs because of our proximity to the two main highways and then having commercial operations right at the town border going into that. All of those things
Yeah.
make us,
Mhm.
we had that conversation about.
You and I
Columbine,
did. Yeah, I
right?
don't know if I shared this with you guys. This was really interesting. When Neshoba was bringing in Hudson, they had an assessment analysis done on, rather than splitting it equally, what would it be if you did it by population and what would it be if you did it by call volume? If you split it evenly, at that time it was 216,000. For Berlin, if you split it by population, we pay 85,000. If you split it by call volume, we'd pay 209,000. The population is not necessarily indicative of the workload or the calls or the service.
Right, but
So-
that's why Highland Commons pays $600,000 a year towards public safety, is to
Correct.
offset that.
Correct.
Yes, but I think also people that live in town might be wondering, well, why is the police and fire budget so high if we can't get the cultural council or if we can't get this or that? And part of the answer is that it's just a function of the unique
Positioning of the
positioning
town.
of the town where it sits, and we're obligated to do these things. There's an accident at the Route 62 exit from 495, it's our guys. And it's every day, it seems like it's all the time.
Correct.
And we
So-
do use that Highland Commons money to pay for 3
Yes.
police officers in the budget. That money
Yeah,
directly goes in the budget.
Right, and also the capital items.
And capital, yeah,
but when you look at the budget numbers, they look large. But I
correct.
think it's important for people to realize that they're right-sized. It's not an area where we've let things just expand. It's not an empire, it's right-sized for the task.
Correct. And you often have to explain that discussion. Someone will say, well, why do you need a new cruiser every 2 years? Because that cruiser is constantly moving,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, once you hit 100,000 miles, everything breaks.
Yeah, so but it's hard. People look at the budget and they go, oh, 2%, whoa, 15% for public safety? Look at that.
Yeah.
And then you have to sit down and explain it to them why it's so high. I think Cliff, were you gonna say something? I don't know if I cut you off, or I'm sorry if I did.
Oh, not to worry. I
Fine.
can't remember what it was.
The thought got lonely and left. There you go. Mhm.
I don't feel
All right.
But I
slighted,
think-
even though I'm not there with you all.
But I think Peg kind of keyed in on where I'm kind of sitting in the whole budget and the thought process is that the town is sacrificing so much for the schools. And there's all this talk about Berlin is a desirable community to live in because of our property values and the value of our school. Well, if we start taking away police officers,
Dump.
firefighters, the
Right.
dump,
Mhm.
the number of vehicles or employees to do salting and plowing. What is that doing to the attractiveness of the community? I mean, there's gotta be a balance here, and now seeing what additional has been shaved off from the budget between Kristen and between the select board. I don't think there's any more you can ask the town departments to sacrifice at this point. It's got to come from the school budget.
And these are the discussions that need to be had, that for some reason, if school stands up and says, I want my budget of 100,000, then we all have to be prepared to stand up and say, yes, but. And again, we're all just one vote. It all depends upon who sits in that room in May, but you've got to present the information to them. You cannot have falsehoods unchecked becoming fact.
Do we know, just looking at this increase in the tax rate from the 1.95% to the 6.88%, what was the driving force in that? Was there a big project that
It was the schools.
it was the school?
Yeah, the school
Mhm.
budget has gone up
Well,
a
Those
chunk
2
in the last
years,
couple of years.
Mostly.
Well, I mean, there's, as far as
Public
increase
safety
goes
cost
between these two,
increases.
but
Yeah.
I mean, from 2% to 7%, that's a huge jump.
huge
all at
jump.
once.
I mean, I
Okay,
can,
so that first year, the schools came in wanting 20% increase. And if they're roughly half of our budget, you can see that impact. And it got knocked down to, I think it was around 10% increase, but that's still, so that's really, those 2 years, you're looking at school increases.
It was the
Mhm.
school, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
by the way, this should be in your email.
I did find it, yes. I opened one of Kristen's emails, not both of them.
Yeah,
I
okay.
apologize.
and also the other increases there too, is the new growth was higher. So that's incorporating the new growth number in there, in those percentages.
That's
So it's
right.
not the
That's right.
levy percentages.
Oh,
And
I-
because the new
that's true,
growth
you
has
could see
dropped,
that.
I mean, which is significantly,
Yeah.
that's making those, that's why. It's
You're
like,
looking at Highland Ridge coming online in those numbers.
yeah, that's why I'm like, no, concerned with those percentages.
Okay.
but it's not just the schools. I mean, if you look at 23 to 24, there's a significant increase in general government on the town side. There's an increase in public safety. And then obviously there's a significant increase in intergovernmental, which is where the schools sit. But there were increases, on both sides of the equation, if you will. So, just in all fairness.
So is FinCom any closer to finding a final number? Because it is 10:22 and I'm, I'm honestly ready to go.
I thought the spreadsheet actually had the number, not the number I've read, but if you scroll down to the bottom of the expense one, the expense tab where you show.
Oh, the expense tab, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This one?
That's right. And so in the percentage, so the 185,933 is what schools would. I'm in row 235 whoops,
I don't know why it keeps doing that.
CU. That bold number right there,
Uh-huh.
which
Okay.
Kristen has listed that's the amount of
Is that
money
right?
the school would have to go up to keep our tax revenue at about 3.5, the 3.5 number that you were looking at earlier.
Basically, it would need to be another, if we wanted to do 3.5%, it would need to be another 385,000.
Right. And so you remove
cuts.
that from the 570 that they've asked us for.
Oh, no, that doesn't include that doesn't include the select board cuts, though. Hold on, I gotta go back to that number. We're changing here. Stop it.
Don't watch.
No one watch.
Don't watch.
Don't look.
Okay, we're not
Don't
looking.
watch the soup being made. It's messy.
'Cause I thought the
Don't
number
worry,
was about 200,000 is what you're going to ask the schools to limit their operating increase to hit your 3.5%
The
target.
number we were looking at earlier was roughly 207,000. It was 206 and change. So when we looked at this screen
Right.
before, so I'm
Yeah,
agreeing,
right,
but that
right.
was the.
Right. So if there's a
Yeah.
message that to meet your sort of target, the message you want to send to the school board is limit the operational change to $200,000. Would get you the 3.5% budget increase that you were looking at without any further cuts to the town.
And that's what Kristen could communicate with them
Mhm.
via email.
Mhm.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well,
it's late and
I'm
getting
one
tired.
voice, but
Right.
How's that?
The town increase you had come up shown before.
Going-
I wrote it
Going
down.
back.
Boy Scout, I have some school.
109, it should be 109,971
Appendix to
is
the.
what those
Look
cuts
at
in.
the Berlin Memorial.
There we go.
There we go. I just went
Yeah, but
back.
it's not Berlin, it's Tohoto that I care
Oh, and
about.
there's 2 more pages. This is the.
So they'd
appendix.
have to cut another
They don't have it by
207.
classroom, but they have the
Right.
numbers.
So
Yep.
this is the number right
This is the
there.
number. Sorry, I
Right,
had to
but
go
it still
back.
doesn't break Berlin versus Boylston. That's
They-
the number I want.
They would have to cut another $207,000
Not
from
on
their
any
operating.
number on
So
any
it's been
sheet.
running at 35%.
What are you
40.
looking
We
at?
got a couple.
So,
different
so do we,
Yeah.
Conversation,
Yeah.
sorry. I'll stop
Let's,
this.
yeah,
so
So
do
this-
we want to go back to the school committee telling them how much additional we want them to cut? Or do we want to give them a number that we want them to be at?
well, right now, the 206, well, say it's 207, that would be asking them to be at the operating number of what,
364, 197.
An operating
360
increase of
increase.
364, 197. Yep.
right?
Which would mean $207,000 in additional cuts.
Yeah, overall. Okay, so
That needs to be a motion.
yes,
They're all pondering. I'm
well-
looking at all of them. They're all pondering, Cliff.
I mean, that is obviously a big number.
Yes, it is.
And that's at the 3.5%. I know we've gone, I mean, I'm still amenable to the target of, I mean, granted, everybody's doesn't like it, the 4% of each year. What the original target has been. We're not, the target has been 2.5, but what is, we've ended up targeting it being 4%.
Do you want to see what that would look like at
Well,
4%?
Yeah, do the
Is that what you're-
4%.
Should we start here? Cause,
And then go up.
and then go up?
Right. This is to give them a number for Tuesday that they'll get back to you what they think they can do, that next Wednesday you can see where there's a number between them.
Now, but they would need to cut 131,000.
if we
Right.
went
Because
to-
each 0.5% is about 75,000.
Yeah. Well, like I said right there.
Well, Scott,
Thanks for,
I think
Go ahead, Cliff.
I think your 4% increase is more, I would support a 4% increase.
do you have any, Mary?
Well, we've got some history. We've got a 3 years of history, Cliff, that says if we start at 3.5, we're probably gonna end up at 4 or 4.5 anyway. So I'm sticking by the 3.5 for that reason. I think it's important to look at the numbers and what we think is right. And I don't like the cuts to the town budget that we're doing. I don't like turning down the supplemental requests. There weren't any of them that were crazy. So I'm pretty firm on that, where I'd like to be. I'd like that 3.5 to be a ceiling, knowing that things are gonna change, and when it
Right.
gets rolled up and we're actually sending out tax bills next year, it's gonna be higher than that. That's what the history shows me.
All right. Now,
I
Heidi,
just can't do this another year to the people here.
yeah, like, let Heidi's,
I mean, I think
Hold on,
we should do the 3.5% because it's still ongoing negotiations.
okay, we have 2 at 3.5, 2 at 4. I think we'll just do a motion for 3.5%. Who wants, I'll let Mary or Heidi do the wording.
Right.
Good practice for you. No big audience here.
So should the motion include the percentage or include that dollar amount?
I would probably do a dollar amount as opposed to a percentage, because that's, the 3.5 isn't gonna mean anything to them.
And
Okay.
keep in
Yeah.
mind too, that as they have said multiple times, there's still a negotiation for teacher contracts. So if you go in at 3.5, the contract could come in and say, we want $1 billion. It's gonna jack that number.
And we have to abide by the contract,
We
right?
do.
Well, you also give the district something to put on their side of the table, which is the towns. have
But I'm
limits.
just saying,
The
just,
towns have limits, so.
right, just keep that in mind, is that the teacher
Yeah.
negotiations are still ongoing and nothing has been settled.
And keep in mind that
I'll let you word the
that the
motion.
very, and keep in mind that personnel costs are the
Sorry.
largest percentage of the school budget.
Yes.
91% or something. I mean, it's high.
Yes,
You're
very high.
So you can either, sorry, Cliff.
It's okay, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
Go ahead, Mary. You're on.
Either do it with the request of the number to decrease their operating by, or we'll do the math and say that their operating should be the 364, 197, or a decrease of 206, 790. You probably ask them for the actual number 364, 197.
May I make a recommendation?
Yeah.
I would recommend you request they reduce their operating budget by another $207,000. I think
Okay.
that's the simplest.
Okay.
I move that the Berlin Finance Committee recommend to the BBRSD, the district, that the amount of the Berlin assessment be reduced by, let's use a round number, $207,000.
I second that.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, roll call, Scott, aye.
Heidi, I.
Cliff, you're on mute, are you? No?
No,
Think.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
thinking.
I can't see you.
I know,
because
I can
the
look
screen's
up
behind
at it.
me and I
can
can't
look
see
up
it,
at
Cliff. I apologize. I'm missing all your nonverbals here.
I'm gonna vote no.
Okay.
Okay,
Nice ratio. Just right 3 to
okay,
1.
so motion passes 3-1.
Get it? Thinks it's time now.
Okay, so that will be you'll do the communication.
I was
to
gonna
them.
say, yeah, because I am not an elected official, I can actually send this number to Al now, which I think you would like to have. So
Yes, yep.
I just letting folks know that's what I'm doing.
Al
All
and
right.
Aaron?
I don't have Aaron's cell phone number. I don't think.
Oh, you're texting him. Oh, okay,
Texting him.
okay.
Okay, do we want to, while you're doing that, talk about some of I'd like to maybe get our opinion on their cuts regarding the stipends to the positions of the moderator, their own select board, the Board of Health, and the assessors, right? It's those
Mhm.
four, I had those complete.
Mhm.
I guess what I'd want to do is put basically, I would just put out the motion to recommend the cutting the stipends to zero for the Board of Health, Select Board, Moderator, and Assessors. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, now discussion. Anybody want to just, hopefully giving Kristen some time here. I'll let her scroll it up so you can see the dollar amounts.
They're not large.
Yeah, they're not large. They are though, there are reduces health insurance impacts. I mean, or whether it's now or even in the future. Exposure, I should say, health insurance, the cost exposure. So the moderator,
It's
what, 50
50.
bucks?
Yep.
The select board, 4,017. And then the assessors, 2,540. And then the Board of Health. I don't know what
They're a little ways down.
yeah. Are they under? Right there.
Right there.
$2,086.
So 10 grand-ish.
Yep. Yeah.
ish.
And that would result in there would be no elected positions in the town that would be receiving well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, that's not I mean, it would eliminate the eligibility for health insurance to these four
For elected
board
members.
members.
Yes, and would make me more comfortable with the $800,000 number because then you're going to have additional reductions in people on health insurance.
So, anybody have any questions on this or comments? Mary?
I'm trying to capture the motion I just made. So we're basically voting on your motion. You do
Yeah.
a motion on the floor,
Yes.
which is to do what the select. board-
Yes, to recommend the cutting of those four boards or members, elected members, stipend to zero.
Okay.
Well, Mary's thinking, Cliff, do you have any comments?
No, I'm going to support it. I just want to mention that when I was on the school committee, this was one of the first actions we took. We eliminated the stipends for school committee.
Oh, that's good information.
I'm
Are you all
good.
set, Mary?
I'm good.
Okay, so go for roll call. Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Heidi, I.
Cliff, I.
All right, so that those four line item recommendations pass 4-0. And let's go to the health insurance one then. You already heard Kristen's comment that eliminating those makes it more comfortable with the large reduction of just over $100,000 in Chapter 32B, which was already reduced by 44,000 by Kristen's recommendation before that.
Did you miss one?
There were four, right?
Just for
Okay.
So I'll do the motion to recommend. Can you go to a little bit further over to get the right number?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna hide these for right now because it's gonna hide some things at the bottom, but it'll make it easier for us to see everything.
Well, actually, before I even make a motion,
Line
on
111.
all of these in section 900, I mean, health insurance is a clear one. That, big change. These others, I mean, Worcester Regional Retirement, I mean, we are stuck on that.
Correct.
Workers' comp, unemployment insurance. sick
Those are
pay.
0 increases.
Yeah, no increases. So what I'm gonna do is make do the recommendation that Finance Committee recommend items 98 through 104 under miscellaneous benefits and insurance. as
second it.
recommended by the select board.
I'll second it.
Right? Any other discussion? Okay, go for a roll call. Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Heidi, I.
Cliff, I.
All right, passes 4-0.
Mhm. Excellent. Where would you like to go next?
Let's just jump up to was there any, let's see, what are the other tough ones?
May I interrupt and can I
Yeah.
make a motion for the select board to close and leave? Unless you need
Yes.
us.
We don't need you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, you may.
So the paint is dry, is it?
It's beyond dry.
So you made a motion,
Second.
second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.
10:38.
10:38, we're out. Appreciate you.
Okay, thank you.
Good
We'll
night.
see if we go
Thanks
any
for
quick
hanging in
ones here and then do the same thing.
Okay. Or do you want to go back to the top or?
Uh, let's just look here at the five human services, what's
Sure.
in here.
That's where you have Council on Aging, Board of Health.
Council on Aging is a little, well, let's put it this way, the discussion I heard, describing of, difficulty of having the van driver, what has been provided through the, was it Metro West
Yep.
Regional Transit and the grant? That's good through the entire next fiscal year and slightly into the next. I don't see an issue with these changes.
Mhm. I
Anybody
agree.
else?
Agree.
It almost sounds like the current transportation that's being provided is a better option.
Yes.
People seem to like it.
Yes.
All right, so what's the bottom number? Is there any more on the 500s? Well,
That's
that's it, okay. So put a recommendation, we've already covered item 73. So so the recommendation is Finance Committee recommendation for items 74 through 83 under Human Services for the select board's recommended numbers. You have a
I
second?
second it.
We have a second. Any other discussion?
Nope.
All right. Cliff, you're all set?
I'm all set.
Okay, roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Heidi, I.
Cliff, I.
All right, vote passes for 0. Just motor through this is quick.
Yes, I
What's under the 600s?
am. 600s are is library, cultural library rec.
Okay, select board did now vote to 0 that out, right? On the cultural council.
They haven't voted on it yet. That's now the only line item besides the schools they haven't voted on.
Okay. I mean, library, I mean, they have a lot of things that are just, there's no other supplementals there. Their expenses are pretty much dictated by the state to get their matching money and their certification. Well, recreation is an unknown at the moment.
Library did send me something today about they may be able to offset their supplemental by going down on the expense increase. That might be one we want to discuss a little further next time.
Okay, so we may just want to skip this for next meeting.
Sure. Debt and interest are pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that and interest, yes, like, all right. Finance Committee motion is Finance Committee recommend items 91 and 92 under debt and interest. We have a second.
Seconded.
All right, any other discussion needed? Okay, roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Heidi, I.
Cliff,
I
I.
would also,
Okay, passes 4-0.
I'm sorry, Cliff. I would recommend you could do line items 93 through 95 as well.
Okay, yeah, this is,
CMRPC.
yeah, Aspen Regional Housing
is 0.
Consortium and Aspen Valley Regional Assessment. Okay, so motion is Finance Committee recommend items 93, 94, and 95 under intergovernmental.
I'll second it.
All right, Any other discussion needed? All right, roll call, Scott, aye.
Heidi, I.
Sorry, what line are we on?
93, 94, and 5. So it's Aspen Valley Regional Assessment,
Oh,
Aspen Valley
sure,
Regional Housing
okay.
Consortium, and CMR.
Mary, I.
Cliff, I.
All right, passes 4-0.
Oh, and I forgot about little old line item 97 down here, which is zeroed out as well. Would you like to amend the motion to add line 97?
Well, yes, we'll just do the motion as.
Okay.
Um, motion is Finance Committee recommend line item 97 under intergovernmental expenditures, which is 0.
Right. It's now been moved to police.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, I don't think we need another discussion. So roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Heidi, I.
Cliff, I.
All right, passes 4-0.
You want to go up to the top now?
Yeah, go to the top. And is there anything of significance here besides what we've Finance Committee expenses?
No, I don't have an issue with any of these proposed reductions by the select board in the general government section, I don't believe. This one's a little tight, does make me a little bit nervous, but again, we could come back for a reserve fund transfer if the fuel oil increases. I was recommending 70, they wanted to cut that back to 55.
Okay. And is that the last number in that section?
Oops, sorry, one more.
And the town
Town
report.
report. They recommended the 5 that after we had discussed the costs for Powderhouse and
Okay, so let's scroll up to the top. And just to cause a little confusion there for, so let's see, motion is for Finance Committee to recommend items number 2, 4, 5, and 7 through,
44.
the assessors weren't in there, right? That,
The assessors are in here.
oh, did I?
You already voted for them.
Yeah, well, 2 through,
A revote is not a horrible thing. I mean, I know you already voted on it,
yeah,
but
we'll just give us 2 through 14, then 16 through 44,
there you go.
Second.
as recommended by the select board.
You have
And
a second. Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? Everybody's clear? All right, roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Heidi, I.
Cliff, I.
All right, passes 4-0.
All right, I'll pretty this up tomorrow. I'm just gonna drag it down
I
so we have
think,
a number.
cover all the big stuff. Do we just want to call it a night?
Yes, please.
Okay,
No,
right.
let's go some
well,
more.
motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All right, roll call. Well, I guess Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Heidi, I.
Cliff, I.
All right, we are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on. I've left